Chapter 1651–1675 Supremacy Games 1651 The second round. 3. Oof, I wouldn't want to be in his position. Aeolus showed a sympathetic look. He knew that Hephaestus wasn't having the best day of his life, as he would be losing no matter what he did in this situation. Whether he got rid of Felix's clones or not, Poseidon would have already conquered at least 20% of his territory. Since Felix was using mere clones, he had nothing to lose from this confrontation. You think of me as a joke? Do you think I will sit by and watch as you make a show out of me? I will show you. Hephaestus huffed in and out heated smoke with a hint of suppressed anger in his eyes. I will show you both. OSH*T, they have done it. Well, even Poseidon will get a piece now. The moment the Eunuchans saw that crazed look in his eyes, they couldn't help but suck a deep breath in dread. They knew that he had snapped at last, and as a Eunuchan with the fastest fuse, this wasn't the first time they saw him reach this stage. He has fallen at last, I just need to survive now and consume his divinities. Meanwhile, the thick murderous crazed aura released by Hephaestus didn't faze Felix in the slightest. Instead, it made his heart skip a beat at the notion that his plan was developing in the right direction. He already studied Hephaestus' personality plenty and knew that when he got put in a losing or a humiliating position, he was prone to snapping easily. Brat! You asked for this! With a bellow that echoed like thunder through the fiery realm, Hephaestus invoked the resplendent divinity on his weapon at last. His massive hammer began to glow with a blinding light, radiating pure celestial power. The weapon transformed, becoming a beacon of divine wrath, its every swing capable of unleashing devastating power equal to 100 times its usual force. It was like the weapon had a bottleneck and resplendent divinity brute forced it. Yet, he wasn't done. Simultaneously, he channeled the brilliant runic divinity, causing ancient runes to appear and swirl around his body. These runes enhanced his physical strength and prowess, imbuing him with a temporary but overwhelming surge of power. His muscles bulged, and his eyes glowed with an inner fire as he felt the raw untapped power coursing through him. He really snapped. He even dared to waste brilliant runic divinity on a temporary enhancement. Zeus frowned deeply as he adjusted his seating on his thunder throne. All Eunuchans understood that brilliant runic divinity was the only possible method to get stronger permanently, which made it even more precious than other divinities in their eyes. So, for him to consume it in a manner that boosted his strength temporarily made them understand that he wasn't f***ing around anymore. With all three divinities activated at once, Hephaestus could be said to be at his peak at the moment. He had a perfect shield, a perfect weapon, and a perfect strength surpassing even Felix's. Yet still, he shrank his body to a more humanoid stature, making every inch of him radiate with the intensity and power of a god. With a bloodthirsty glare, Hephaestus launched himself at Felix and his clone, disappearing out of sight in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already swinging his divine hammer at Felix's clone wrist, leaving behind a long trail of heated plasma, fire, and magma cascading across the battlefield. Before Felix could even manage to release a single word, he watched as his clone got smashed and hurled into the massive wall of the magma sphere. Boom! Upon impact, the thick wall shattered into pieces as Felix's clone pierced into an arrow. Just as Felix's clone wanted to reorient himself and take advantage of the attack to absorb more celestial energy outside of the sphere, Hephaestus appeared behind him akin to a ghost, and held him by his leg upside down. Then, he tightened his grasp until the bone cracked and breathed the most concentrated and intense level of plasma into his being. PSSSSSSSSSSS. The celestial flames shield around the clone interfered with the heated plasma, which saved Felix's clone from turning into charcoal. However, both Felix and his clone knew that it was getting consumed at a much more rapid rate like this, since the plasma breath was empowered by 100 times through the resplendent divinity. He can't last even a couple of seconds like this, Thor expressed. He has to use greed laws to get out. You know he can't, he barely has enough for the last step of his plan and he can't waste it on anything. Lady Sphinx remarked with a solemn tone. As she mentioned, neither Felix nor his clone even considered greed law as a feasible solution. Still, Felix realized that he had to save his clone before his celestial shield expired and be left for damnation. Abyssal vortex. He waved his palm once in the direction of Hephaestus and a massive swirling vortex of void energy manifested, reaching up to thousands of kilometers. It was so powerful and potent, it tore apart the fabric of reality in its vicinity. Anything caught in the vortex was pulled apart into subatomic particles. Even Hephaestus' clones weren't able to escape from its defying terror. Yet, Hephaestus wasn't fazed as he observed the approaching pitch black vortex. Consume this, coronal ejection lance. With a cold gaze, he gathered the plasma from a newborn star's corona in his palm, shaping it into a lance of pure energy. He then launched this lance with pinpoint accuracy at the terrifying vortex. Upon contact, the void vortex tried to break apart the lance into subatomic particles, but the particles within the lance were already broken apart and unstable to the point a mere disturbance could cause everything to collapse. This was exactly what occurred as the moment the lance reached the eye of the storm, it turned into a blinding point of light, then, there was no then. The void vortex, the all-devouring monster, the breaker of realities fell apart and got ate up by the blinding emerging supernova. Void particles had no chance against empowered plasma particles with resplendent divinity, which made Felix understand that a void or evil energy shield wouldn't protect him for sh*t. So, he was forced to give up on his clone and guard himself and the supreme symbol by enhancing the shielding power of the celestial flames. Naturally, he didn't forget to slip in hunger symbol, desiring to absorb the supernova's energy and empower him. Not a chance. Hephaestus retracted 2 fingers into his chest and the expanding supernova began to shrink like it was affected by a time spell. It continued shrinking until it became into a tiny blinding rotating marble, emitting so much suppressed energy, anyone without proper defenses would die at first sight. With a brutal motion, Hephaestus aimed the same 2 fingers at Felix's clone chest, transforming them into a piercing weapon of searing heat. Before the clone could react, Hephaestus plunged his molten fingers deep into its chest. The almost non-existent celestial flames shield was broken apart as it could no longer deal with Hephaestus' overwhelming strength. Arg! Felix's clone groaned while holding tightly into Hephaestus' extended arm in his chest, trying his best to escape, but to no avail. He was outclassed in strength, abilities, potentness, and divine barrier. There, in the cavity created by his fiery touch, Hephaestus teleported the suppressed marble that pulsed with a contained supernova's power. With a look of grim satisfaction, Hephaestus withdrew his hand and forcefully flung the clone toward Felix. The clone's body, still intact but visibly marred by the god's molten touch, sailed through the air, and his eyes came into sudden contact with Felix's. The moment their eyes locked together, the clone merely gave him a slight head nod and closed his eyes. Click! Then, with the soft snap of fingers resounding in this deafening silence, Hephaestus triggered the marble. In an instant, the marble inside the clone's chest expanded exponentially, replicating the cataclysmic process of a supernova. A blinding light erupted from the clone's form, expanding rapidly into a miniature star that burned with unbridled fury. The light was so intense, so all-consuming, that it momentarily illuminated the entire battlefield, casting stark shadows amidst the flames and smoke. As the light of the supernova reached its peak, it imploded with a deafening roar, collapsing in on itself with the unstoppable force of a collapsing star. The explosion was both beautiful and terrifying, a spectacle of raw celestial power unleashed in the heart of battle. When Hephaestus cancelled the explosion midway, nothing remained of Felix's clone. The spot where the clone had stood up moments ago was now eerily empty. The tenants continued staring at Hephaestus in utter silence, causing the consciousness space to be filled with the sound of their drumming hearts beating loudly. An inexplicable level of dread covered their faces, an emotion every one of them rarely felt. Their emotions were valid, as even though Felix's clone didn't use many of its powers due to certain conditions, the fact still stood: Hephaestus had obliterated a Unigen-level being, and if that was the real Felix, only Isna's and the Paragon's core would have been left behind. "You're next." Hephaestus narrowed his bone-chilling eyes at Felix as he manifested 5 tiny star cores above his fingers. 1652. The second round. 4. Meanwhile Poseidon, observing the battlefield from a vantage point within his vast oceanic domain, watched with a mix of awe and concern as Hephaestus unleashed his devastating supernova attack on Felix's clone. He understood that Hephaestus, in his current state of fury and unbridled power, was a force of nature, acting beyond the bounds of reason and strategy. Hephaestus has truly lost himself to rage, Poseidon mused inwardly, the waters around him reflecting his troubled thoughts. If he finishes with the last clone, he will undoubtedly turn his wrath towards me. He's no longer thinking strategically, he's acting on sheer destructive impulse. Still, I ain't retreating. With a cold smirk, he summoned the full might of his oceanic domain, urging the colossal tsunami to push forward with even greater force. The massive wave, already a terrifying spectacle, grew in intensity and speed, driven by Poseidon's will to engulf and subdue Hephaestus's fiery territory. Hephaestus's wisps attempted to stem the tide, using whatever was within their power to stop the tidal wave, but Poseidon's resolve was unyielding, and his command over the sea was absolute. A mere cold look from him was enough to blow those wisps into fragments, leaving the fiery domain unprotected against his ambitious conquest. Apollo, Zeus, Athena, and the rest of the Unigens watched as Poseidon's ocean began to consume the land of fire and brimstone, transforming it under the weight of its watery embrace. Nothing and no one was able to stand before him and his oceanic might. All Hephaestus could do was watch as his domain was being devoured, feeling like his soul was being feasted upon bit by bit. Knowing that he could not stop Poseidon unless he dealt with Felix first, Hephaestus didn't have a single notion of fooling around with him. He didn't even taunt or curse as usual. With a series of swift, fluid motions, Hephaestus smashed 5 star cores, one after the other, against the anvil of his hammer. Each impact caused a brilliant eruption of light and energy, transforming the cores into focused beams of plasma. These beams, 100 times more potent than his previous attacks, shot forth with the speed and intensity of a supernova's wrath. The beams streaked across the battlefield toward Felix, their brightness was blinding, their heat unimaginable, capable of turning anything in their path into ash. Felix, realizing the immense danger these plasma beams posed, quickly assessed his options. He understood that even a single beam could consume all the celestial energy protecting him, leaving him vulnerable to Hephaestus's wrath. The stakes were higher than ever, a direct hit from any of these beams would spell certain doom. Phew! 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 With agility born of necessity, Felix maneuvered swiftly, dodging the relentless onslaught of plasma. He moved like a shadow, each leap and dive calculated to evade the searing paths of destruction. The beams scorched the ground where he had been moments before, leaving trails of melted rock and vaporized metal in their wake. As he evaded the beams, he sought an opening, a moment of vulnerability in Hephaestus's assault, to turn the tide, or at least to counterattack. Alas, that was nothing but a mere fantasy. Hephaestus might have lost himself to anger, but his battle sense had just gotten much better, akin to a warrior entering the zone in a moment of barbaric rage. Thus, Felix found himself incapable of touching him regardless of what ability used. The few times where something did land, his radiant divinity shield blocked it. I can't keep up. He is bound to hit me sooner or later. Felix's expression kept turning for the worse the more intense Hephaestus got in his attacks. The worst part? Hephaestus was getting nearer and nearer to destroying his supreme symbol, as there was no way Felix could defend both himself and the symbol against this onslaughter. I have to either commit to the finale now or give up. Felix wanted before to move on with the final stage of his plan only after exhausting Hephaestus' divinities, but at this pace, he understood that he might end up losing his clone before it happened. As for getting out of the massive magma sphere? Hephaestus was way faster than him at the moment and would never let that happen unless Felix used his greed laws to teleport him. Even then, Hephaestus would appear instantly in front of him since they were battling above his domain. I have to commit, I won't have a better opportunity like this. As Felix was avoiding death by inches, he understood that opportunities were too rare. Where could he find a Unigen with almost no divinities on him again? Just this small taste made him understand that Unigens with the 3 divinities utilized at once were complete monsters. He couldn't imagine battling one of them with a much more quantity than Hephaestus while he barely had enough to sustain his celestial flames shield. No matter what he did, the balance would always favor the Unigens. The tenants remained silent, as they understood the risk Felix was about to partake and they didn't want to cloud his judgment with their opinions at such a critical moment. Thus, they kept their mouths shut and watched as Felix commenced the last part of his master plan. Back at the Void Nation's base, Felix's main consciousness, which had been monitoring the battle from afar, suddenly sprang into action. His eyes snapped open, revealing a depth of resolve and cunning. With focused intent, Felix invoked the greed laws. His first wish was to cloak the clone next to him from the prying eyes of the 3 rulers and the Unigens. Just as the price was about to get paid and the wish could commence, Felix made a second wish to teleport him to a specific location. The 2 wishes overlapped and the moment the clone disappeared from the celestial eyes, he was already gone from Felix's side. The Unigens watching both the battle and Felix's base from their lofty vantage points, noticed the clone's sudden disappearance. Where did his clone go? Did he send him to help in the battle? Instead of giving up on his clone, he sends another? Is he dumb? Doesn't he realize that his soul was receiving a beating like this? However, as they scanned the battle between Hephaestus and Felix, there was no sign of the clone. The confusion started to set in, their celestial brows furrowing in perplexity. Just as they were grappling with the mysterious vanishing act, Felix made his second wish, a risky wish that no one would anticipate Felix to dare do, not in a million years. Get me to the battlefield. A moment after Felix uttered his wish, he materialized right into the fray with a confident stride. His sudden appearance, especially with the SNES core within him, sent shockwaves of stupefaction and disbelief among the celestial onlookers. What? Did he lose his mind? Hey! Even Athena was left with widened eyes, her brain working on extra juice to analyze this brazen act of bringing the coveted SNES core directly into the heart of the battle. However, in an instant, she broke out of her daze and swiftly left her throne, aiming to join the battlefield without an ounce of hesitation. The same decision was made by every Unigen as they all had one single thought in their minds. A chance. What Felix had just done was the equivalent of bringing a fat piece of meat into the dens of the wolves. None of them spent a single moment caring about the protection of their territory when a SNES core was literally a few seconds away. Have you lost your mind? Meanwhile, Hephaestus was left staring at the real Felix standing in front of him with a startled gaze. The brazenness and confusion were too much. It quenched some of his anger and made him halt his assault, leaving some room for his brain to process this God-sent opportunity placed before him. We are about to find out. Felix uttered with an emotionless predatory tone as black flames started to ignite on his body. 1653. The second round. Since you are seeking death so much, I feel obligated to help. Before Hephaestus could finish his sentence, in a coordinated burst of energy, Felix and his clones' bodies suddenly ignited with wildly intense flames. The flames that enveloped the clone were of a brilliant white hue, while Felix was wreathed in deep, dark celestial flames. The intensity of these flames was such that they transcended the ordinary spectrum, signaling a surge of power on a cosmic scale. As the celestial flames roared around them, magnificent wings unfurled from their backs. These wings, composed of the same ethereal fire, spread wide, casting an awe-inspiring silhouette against the backdrop of the chaotic battlefield. The spectacle was both beautiful and terrifying, a manifestation of power that blurred the line between a celestial and a Unigen. What, how, Impossible! Where is he getting this much celestial energy? The intensity of these celestial flames was so immense that Hephaestus felt their searing celestial heat from a distance. As the god of the forge, he should be immune to the nuances of flame and heat. Yet, he sensed a burning force unlike any he had ever encountered before. It was a heat so pure and overwhelming that it began to erode the very essence of his three divinities. In that critical nanosecond of vulnerability, Felix and his clone seized their opportunity. They seemed before Hephaestus in an instant, moving with a speed and precision that defied perception. With a synchronized motion born of a shared will, Felix and his clone struck. Their fists, empowered by the combined might of white and black celestial flames, connected with Hephaestus's stunned face. A nanosecond of silence after the blow landed, a massive torrent of the merged celestial flames erupted from Hephaestus's back. Erg! The god of the forge released a pained groan, a sound that echoed with the agony of the flames consuming him. The brilliance of the celestial fire illuminated the battlefield, casting everything in a stark, ethereal light. The radiant divinity barrier couldn't handle the intensity and potentness of the two combined celestial flames, it could do nothing but fade away. It left Hephaestus unprotected at last, causing him to feel the full brunt of the celestial flames. Even him, a god, a unigen, could do nothing but cry involuntarily in pain. Ha, ha, ha 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 ha. This is it. This is it. Apollo was left so marveled and awed by the scene before him that he released a rough, terrifying laugh that was nothing like his noble spoken voice. His fair fingers turned pitch black all of a sudden as they switched the entire strumming tone and melody of his score. It turned from an epic melody that uttered of a hero to an ear-piercing, horrifying melody resembling a horror movie score, yet, it was still weirdly pleasing to listen to. As the lyre's high-pitched tones filled the background of the battle, Felix made a crucial order to Asna's core, which pulsed with an otherworldly power within him. Devour Hephaestus' core! He commanded in a tone that brooked no opposition. The core responded to Felix's command, awakening with a predatory hunger. It began to exert an invisible, yet irresistible force, targeting the very essence of Hephaestus being his core. You! As Hephaestus felt the pull, a primal fear gripped him. The sensation of his core being drawn out was both alien and violating, stirring an instinctual dread within the depths of his soul. Hephaestus, his eyes wide with the realization of his peril, locked gazes with Felix. In Felix's eyes, he saw the cold, calculated intent of a predator who had planned this moment from the start. The revelation hit Hephaestus with the force of a physical blow. He had been lured into a trap that now threatened to strip him of his life. In your dreams. He watched what happened between Felix and Lilith's clone. Since he found out later on that everything was part of Lilith's scheme, he was under the assumption that there was no way Asna's clone would be able to devour Unigen's cores unless they allowed it to happen without a proper fight. Thus, his first thought wasn't to panic and escape but to fight back against the devouring process. Alas, he had overestimated his control over his core and underestimated Asna's social ranking. Before her core, whether she was in control or not a single Unigen could stop the merging process once it began. Impossible! Impossible! Thus, he fought and resisted, but to no avail. The cores were glued together and this realization finally dawned on him. I have to retreat. Only now did panic set in as he tried to flee the battlefield and retreat through his domain. He might have snapped, but he wasn't a retard to engage with Felix when he was at risk of losing his core. But before he could act on this desperate impulse, Felix and his clone moved to thwart his escape. You ain't going anywhere. With a majestic and coordinated sweep of their celestial wings, they enveloped Hephaestus in a cocoon of intense celestial flames. The wings formed a cage of ethereal fire, trapping Hephaestus within a small, confined space. The flames, a mixture of white and black colors, created a barrier that was both beautiful and impenetrable. Hephaestus found himself facing the grim reality of his situation. He was at the mercy of Felix, his core slowly being consumed by Asna's core, and any hope of escape rapidly diminishing. It wasn't like he didn't try to use his laws, but the celestial flames were too potent, they provided an intense cancelling effect, even stronger than radiant divinity. What's worse? The black flames were burning him alive, making him feel a type of pain he never thought was possible in his eternal life. If it wasn't for his grit and pain tolerance being on a godly level, he would be crying his eyes out like Duke Humphrey and anyone who experienced the black flames before. I just have to hold for a second or two, arg, that bastard will be here. Before Hephaestus could put his hopes on Poseidoon and other Unigens to rescue him, he suddenly noticed his body being surrounded by a green glow with Felix. When his bloodshot eyes came in contact with Felix's face, he saw the most sinister unruly smile he had ever seen in his life. It was so diabolic, so evil, so sinful that Felix's face seemed to overlap with Lilith's. He always seen Felix as a mere child, a mortal, who was way over his head for daring to ascend and join their ranks, but now, he suddenly felt the same kind of fear and nervousness when dealing with the worst Unigen to grace this universe. And he couldn't help but reflexively utter the infamous name, Paragon, of Sins. The last part of the name came out of his mouth after the scene around them shifted dramatically. The chaotic battlefield, with its clash of elemental forces and the roar of combat, was replaced by the desolate expanse of the Eternal Kingdom's wasteland. It wasn't any random place. Hephaestus couldn't help but feel chills course down his spine after he spotted the magnificent Eternal Kingdom's golden gate at the backdrop, shimmering through the celestial flames. You have encased me in a radiant lockdown and beat me to plump. Felix uttered emotionlessly as he cracked his knuckles, it's only fair we have a second round in the same spot, am I right? 1654 The second round. 6. Moments after Felix's audacious teleportation maneuver, the battlefield that had been a stage for titanic clashes took a brief, eerie pause. Whoosh! 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 In that fleeting calm, the Unigens appeared on the scene. They materialized in a majestic display of their divine presence, each bringing with them an aura of their law dominion. We were too late. Athena knitted her eyebrows in displeasure after noticing that only Apollo and his eerie music were left behind. Apollo remained where he had been, his fingers moving frenetically across the strings of his lyre. He didn't seem to have noticed the disappearance of Felix and Hephaestus, appearing like he had completely lost himself in his horrific score. As the Unigens observed, a creeping darkness began to shroud Apollo's form. The light that typically radiated from him was being slowly consumed by this encroaching darkness, painting a stark contrast to his usual resplendent appearance. The Unigens exchanged glances, a mix of irritation and concern etched on their features. He is having one of his crazed episodes, Zeus, zap him off it. Artemis requested. Zeus didn't need to be told twice as he sent a bright golden electrical charge to Apollo, causing him to twitch involuntarily and interrupt his magnificent performance midway. The moment the music stopped, the darkness seemed to withdraw back within Apollo. His pitch-black pupil returned to normal and his skin became luminous again. At first sight of breaking out of his zone, Apollo scanned around with a muddled look for a moment before he realized what happened. I am most appreciative of your assistance, but I am truly bummed out. Apollo ruffled his hair akin to a frustrated artist as he said, I was so close, so damn close to finishing it. His peer's eyelids twitched in vexation and decided to ignore his existence again, knowing that it wasn't the time to deal with this bipolar psycho. I found them, they are near the Golden Gate. Athena shared with a solemn tone as she used her senses to spy on the ongoing confrontation. The others tuned in as well, and when they saw what Felix was doing to Hephaestus, words refused to come out of their lips. They merely kept spectating in utter silence as they bore witness to a scene of brutal domination that would forever change the dynamics of their pantheon. They watched as Felix relentlessly assaulted Hephaestus with a ferocity that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Felix, empowered by the might of both white and black celestial flames, was a whirlwind of unstoppable destructive force. Each punch he delivered to Hephaestus was a maelstrom of searing pain and power, the flames intensifying the impact to levels beyond mortal comprehension. His kicks, swift and merciless, were like comets streaking across the sky, each one landing with the force of a celestial body colliding with a planet. Hephaestus, renowned for his strength and resilience, was reduced to a mere plaything in Felix's hands. Boredom! Boredom! Thud! The once mighty deity was thrown around like a rag doll, unable to mount any defense against the onslaught. With every blow Felix landed, Hephaestus's body deteriorated further, his divine essence crumbling under the relentless barrage. Zeus and the rest hadn't experienced the white celestial flames for a very long time, as only Isna and the three rulers could wield it. But, they could not forget the small taste all of them had been given by the three rulers to put them in their place. This made them understand on a personal level that Hephaestus wasn't allowing himself to be treated as a rag doll, without divinities to counter the celestial flames or weaken them. It was nothing else but a weapon of absolute ruination. Each punch and kick were simple, straightforward, and had not an ounce of martial arts behind them, yet, they landed on Hephaestus's body like magnets. He is infusing celestial flames into his attacks, causing them to have a cancelling effect, X100 enhancement plus the overwhelming strength increase. Demeter said with a stern tone, "It's like three potent versions of divinities merged at once. I don't even know what that black flame is and the full extent of it. With the human's previous enhancement from his symbols and now this." Zeus sucked in a cold breath. He could be said to have surpassed even our peak temporarily. Hephaestus has no chance against him in his current condition. The sight of Hephaestus's bashed body made them accept this fact no matter how ridiculous it sounded. Thud! Thud! Kaboom! Back into the battle, or more accurately, one-sided beatdown. Brimstone cracked and fell from Hephaestus's frame, magma oozed from his limbs, and lava flowed from his mouth, nose, and wounds like blood from a mortal. The sight was both gruesome and mesmerizing. The celestial flames that engulfed his fists not only inflicted physical damage but also burned away at the very core of Hephaestus's divine being. Arg! Hephaestus, despite his godly powers, found no respite, no opportunity to retaliate or escape. His bloodshot eyes kept wandering back and forth with each strike he ate, seemingly attempting to find a way out of his damnation. Alas, each attempt to fight back was effortlessly swatted away by Felix, who seemed to be in a state of transcendent rage, fueled by a purpose that went beyond mere victory. His face was stoic, cold, and emotionless, but the rage within his eyes was so potent, that the wrathful aura of a dragon kept appearing and disappearing around him, signifying his closeness to activating the rampage symbol's peak. While the tenants' senses were too weak to spectate the beatdown as it was, they were satisfied by the mere delayed sounds of Felix's punches and kicks resounding deeply within them. Those sounds stirred a tumult of emotions rooted in their past traumas and struggles. As they watched Felix overpower the god of the forge, each tenant felt a surge of vicarious satisfaction. "That's it, my boy, that's it." Thor closed his eyes and drank wine from his jar with his head lowered, listening to the noises, and seemingly imagining himself being the one delivering them. Ramongandr, Elder Shiva, and many others enjoyed the noises that were akin to the most pleasing symphony of their lives. This was more than just a fight, it was a symbolic act of retribution, a way of confronting the celestial beings that had manipulated and controlled their destinies from the very start. Among them, the reaction of the ancestral dragon was particularly poignant. "Are you watching this? My sons, daughters, sob, I have wronged you, my pride has wronged you, but, justice is being served at last, sob, our justice is served at last." As he watched Felix pummel Hephaestus, his eyes brimmed with tears, not just of sorrow but also of deep, heartfelt relief. Ancestral Ymir's mind was cast back to the harrowing curse that had befallen his race, a curse that had turned them against one another, driving them to the brink of extinction. The memories of that dark time were vivid and painful. He recalled the skies filled with the roars and cries of dragons, the fire and blood that had rained down as they fought and slaughtered each other. It had been a time of despair and hopelessness, a period when the proud and noble race of dragons had been reduced to mere pawns in a cruel game played by the celestial beings. Even though Lilith was the one who performed the order to take them down, it was still under the orders of the three rulers to punish Ymir's insolence. He didn't take it upon Lilith, as he understood that as the paragon of sins, it was her nature to be the most evil and sinister in her actions. What he blamed the most was himself and the three rulers, especially because they cursed his race's cultivation system and ruined their future forever. While Hephaestus could or couldn't have a part in the destruction of his race, he didn't care at the moment. He felt a sense of vindication, as if, through Felix, the dragons were finally having their say, reclaiming a piece of their dignity that had been stripped away by the capricious whims of the gods. The tenants, united in their shared history of suffering and manipulation, found a common voice in Felix's rebellion. His victory was their victory, a moment of triumph over the forces that had long dictated their fates. In Felix's defiance, they saw a glimmer of hope, a chance for a future where they were no longer mere tools of the celestial beings but masters of their destinies. Thuud. With a surge of force, Felix delivered a powerful kick to Hephaestus, sending the god of the forge hurtling toward the massive gate. Hephaestus's body, already battered and weakened from the unyielding onslaught, crashed into the gate with a resounding impact. The collision was so intense that it echoed across the wasteland. Hephaestus's back shattered upon contact, a mirror image of the injury he had inflicted on Felix in their earlier encounter. The god of the forge slumped against the gate, his divine form marred by the violence of the blow. I can't, fall, here, not, like this, not, to, him. Before Hephaestus could even begin to recover, Felix appeared before him, his presence dominating and his expression one of cold determination. Standing over the fallen deity, Felix leaned in, his eyes locking with Hephaestus's. The air crackled with the tension of the moment, the power dynamics between them now starkly reversed. Don't go limp now, Felix taunted, his voice laced with a menacing calm. We still have a couple of seconds until your core gets devoured. The words, spoken with a chilling resolve, hung in the air between them. Hephaestus, grappling with the pain and shock of his situation, stared up at Felix, a mix of defiance and a hint of fear in his eyes. He could see the predatory look on Felix that made him understand deep down that unless someone came to his rescue, he would eat him whole. The spectating Unigens understood this very well too, and they shared knowing glances between them. The human is too intelligent to risk all of this for the sake of devouring his core if it's not going to prove to be useful for him later on. Athena, the strategist, analyzed calmly, he has a purpose for the core, and after witnessing his current peak, I don't want to find out. None of them gave a crap about Hephaestus' life or losing his core. In their eyes, all of their peers might disappear and it wouldn't affect them negatively, knowing that far down in the future, the universe would bring them back on again. But, if this would result in Felix getting much stronger somehow? None of them dared to sit by and wait for that future to arrive, as they were already struggling to capture him. Am I the only one curious about the origin of his current massive quantity of celestial energy? Aeolus interrupted suddenly. When this matter appeared brought in again, all of them couldn't help but knit their eyebrows in puzzlement. Before Athena might finish her sentence, all Unigens suddenly perked up their pairs akin to bats picking on some signals of a peculiarity ongoing. When they followed their senses, it led them to none other than the celestial capital city. To be more specific, they landed on a human floating thousands of kilometers above the city's sky, who appeared seen sitting in a meditation position while a massive amount of celestial energy rushed through his body akin to a flood. It appeared resembling no one was there, and suddenly, he resurfaced akin to a ghost. When they zoomed in on his face and observed that it belonged to none other than Felix, and to be more precise, Felix's other clone, they received their answer in the most shocking way. 1655 the second round. 7. Right above the celestial city. He dares. Zeus was the first to exclaim with an astounded look as he watched Felix's clone suck in an unfathomable amount of celestial energy like there was no tomorrow. Does he think he is safe just because he is using a clone? Athena shook her head. Lilith should have taught him better. The Unigens weren't surprised by the fact that Felix's clone had been sent to absorb celestial energy from the central zone. They already had an incline he would have done this. What shocked them was the fact he sent his clone above the central city itself. That's because the city was inhabited by none other than the upper celestial Unigens. I wonder who will be sent or if the three rulers will take care of him. Artemis remarked. It's not the time to care about such a thing. Apollo, help us reach the Ghat. Just as Athene turned around, seeking Apollo's assistance, her eyelids couldn't help but twitch in irritation after noticing his disappearance. Ungrateful prick, he has already taken off. Poseidon cursed. Without needing to be asked, Zeus offered to help them out instead. Unigen's speed was somewhat standardized in the sense that they could all reach the speed of light, but not maintain it for a prolonged period, unlike Zeus or Apollo, who used their laws to achieve it. It was like one needing to brute force it purely through physical prowess while the other had the tools. After Zeus took them into his thundercloud above the battleground to facilitate the process, only Poseidon was left behind. The Unigens didn't bother to ask him for his reason as they knew what was going on in his mind. Why do I need to save my rival and fight off against that abnormality with so much competition when I had an entire free domain to conquer? He sneered while gazing at his fellow peers speeding away. If it was only Felix and Hephaestus, he would have given it a thought since he might have a chance to capture Asna's core after Felix exhausted his celestial flames. But, when all of his peers were heading there, his chances were much slimmer. He would rather obtain something certain than chase a questionable reward. Without an ounce of hesitation, he turned into an oceanic titan, a colossal figure towering over the landscape. Defying rainstorm. With a commanding presence that resonated with the depth and might of water, Poseidon raised his trident, a symbol of his dominion over all aquatic laws. Then, he began to spin the trident above his head, each rotation gathering the power of the seas and the skies. The air around him churned with the gathering force as if the ocean itself was responding to the call of its master. As Poseidon's trident spun faster, the skies above Hephaestus' domain darkened ominously. Massive rain clouds, pregnant with the essence of oceanic wrath, formed a brooding canopy. Defying rainstorm. With a thunderous roar that resounded across the realms, the clouds unleashed their burden. Gigantic raindrops, each the size of a truck, began to descend from the sky. Thud. 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 They fell with a force that turned their descent into a cataclysmic downpour, each fall crashing onto the fiery land with the power of a meteorite. The impact of the rain was titanic, creating shockwaves that rippled across Hephaestus' domain. The volcanic landscape, home to creatures born of fire and brimstone, was ill-prepared for such an assault. As the colossal raindrops struck the ground, they quenched the fires and lava flows that defined Hephaestus' realm. The inhabitants of the fiery domain found themselves in peril. Arg! Run! It hurts! It's the wrath of the god of seas! Run! The relentless downpour threatened their very existence, forcing them to flee in search of refuge. The once mighty volcanic land was rapidly transforming into a sodden, steam-filled wasteland. Protect the Lord's sacred land. Hephaestus' right-hand subordinate tried his best to encourage the citizens to unite and defend themselves against the powerful rainstorm to at least save their capital city. Alas, each fall was akin to a meteor, causing many citizens to die upon impact instantly. When the others saw this, how could they dare stay behind? Everyone was for himself and the cities across the massive fiery domain started to get emptied rapidly. Alas, Poseidon was merciless and treated those mortals akin to cockroaches needing to get exterminated for the next renter to live in his new home. No matter how far they ran and how hard they tried, unless they had radiant divinity to protect them, no one managed to make it far against this non-stop downpour. Hephaestus' wisps watched this happen before their own eyes and could do absolutely nothing to change the ending. The moment a wisp tried to use their powers, Poseidon would spot them and erase them with a mere glance. Plus, Hephaestus wasn't really in the best situation to care about the death of his citizens or the conquest of his domain. How could he care about them when his core was being conquered as this was happening? A few moments ago, above the celestial capital city, Felix's clone watched as the invisible sphere around him, protecting him from the eyes of the three rulers and the Unigens, began to crack apart. They sure are quick. Felix's clone frowned, but not an ounce of fear was in his eyes at the suspected of being so close to his mortal enemies. In fact, he was more angered at the suspected of being closer to Asna and still not having the strength to save her. There is a few seconds left before the core gets devoured. I have to hold strong and keep fueling celestial energy. Felix's clone tightened his fists while his heartbeats began accelerating with each crack appearing on his barrier. He had wasted close to everything he had collected of void creatures and even added some of the behemoths to create this powerful invisibility shield. For a shield to hide him from the eyes of the three rulers, it made it impossible for anyone or anything to sense a single thing near Felix. Even the disturbance of celestial energy being fueled into him was hidden. Unfortunately, the three rulers' eyes were like Sauron's eye from the masterpiece, The Lord of the Rings. The instant the barrier fell apart, Felix's clone felt three pairs of eyes affixed to his being, sending a shiver course down his spine involuntarily. He couldn't aid but recall what happened to him during the heavenly plane at his first contact with the first ruler. But this time, Felix didn't allow his emotions and past trauma to get the best of him. He lifted his head and gazed defiantly into the sky, knowing that the three rulers were situated in the dimensional pocket near the universe's heart. The more I see of him, the more I trust the prophecy, no matter how ridiculous it sounded. The second ruler uttered with a tint of interest in her tone. If the prophecy was false, he wouldn't have reached this far. The third ruler remarked calmly. He has always been a part of the grand scheme of the universe. The first ruler added emotionlessly, too bad, his part in the prophecy doesn't align with our desired outcome. With how much you worship that tablet, I won't be surprised if you die out of shock if it fails to deliver what's promised. A serious feminine voice suddenly resounded from one of the lower 5 platforms situated in front of the white plaza below. The three rulers weren't offended by the voice at all. The first ruler glanced below him and said with the same monotonous tone, whether it fails or succeeds, it doesn't matter, for we lack any other option. That's where I disagree with you a lot. Eris emerged from the chaotic light pulsing out of her platform and replied with an indifferent tone, for a universe created out of order and disorder, balance and imbalance, there can't be a cage without a key, and a key without a cage. You simply hate the key given to you and try to brute force the cage. The three rulers remained silent, knowing that she was right, but it still wouldn't change anything. Iris knew this and had no ulterior motives behind her lecture like wanting to change their minds or such. Anyways, I will do you a small favor of dealing with that boy's clone. Eris waved her hand gently and a chaotic portal manifested in front of her. When she walked through it, she emerged in front of Felix's clone. The moment she appeared, Felix's clone was captivated by her air of enigmatic poise, her appearance a striking embodiment of the dual forces she commanded. She had a sharp, intelligent face, framed by cascading grey hair that seemed to shift subtly in hue, now reflecting the crisp, structured shades of order, then undulating into the chaotic, vibrant colors of disorder. Resting on the bridge of her nose was a pair of elegant glasses, which lent her an air of scholarly authority, their lenses catching the light in a way that occasionally flickered between clarity and obscurity. She was clad in a robe that was a tapestry of symmetry and asymmetry, expertly tailored to embody the essence of her dominion. The fabric seemed to alternate between strict geometric patterns and swirling, anarchic designs, creating a visual representation of the balance between order and disorder. Yet, Felix's clone was most fascinated by the open tone in her hands. Its pages fluttered gently as if caught in a breeze that wasn't there. The book was an enigma in itself, its contents shifting between meticulously organized text and wildly scrawling script. At first sight, Felix knew that was no ordinary book. "Little one, you are a long way from home," Eris said calmly. 1656 The second round. 8. The end. First, put some respect to my name. Felix frowned coldly. Secondly, you have taken my home. In Felix's eyes, without Isna, his partner in crime and the love of his life by his side, he had no home to go back to. Through Felix's cold and defensive demeanor, Eris was able to notice his sincere emotions as he had meant every word he said. Interesting, if I may ask, does she share the same love as you? Eris inquired with a tone tinted with a bit of intrigue. I was always under the impression that Unigens are incapable of love, we are above such a mere chemical reaction as we can control it as we please. If love can be manipulated, doesn't that take its value? So, are you little ones truly in love with each other? She pressed, her eyes had the same glitter as Lady Sphinx's whenever she was interested in a subject. While Felix was a bit taken aback by her desire for a conversation instead of getting rid of him, he had no intentions of shushing her. He had to buy time until his mane finished with the devouring process, and she was doing him a favor by giving him such a chance. Alas, before he could open his lips and engage with her, she seemed to have seen through his motives easily. She shook her head and said, I don't think I will get a genuine and truthful response if your mind is focused on something else. Let's fix that, shall we? With a subtle, deliberate motion, she flipped a single page of the mysterious tome. As the page turned, the letters inscribed upon it shimmered with an otherworldly light, a visual symphony of order and chaos intertwined. For a fleeting moment, the script seemed to dance and twist upon the page, morphing into shapes and patterns that defied comprehension. This was no ordinary text, it was the written embodiment of the fundamental forces that Eris commanded. At her command, the reality around her and Felix began to undergo a profound transformation. The air shimmered like a mirage, and the very fabric of space seemed to warp and bend, a surreal distortion enveloped them, altering the landscape into something unrecognizable. Gravity fluctuated erratically, causing objects to float and then suddenly plummet. Time seemed to stretch and compress, moments elongating into eternities before snapping back. The elemental forces present in the environment behaved unpredictably, fire freezing, water burning, and light casting shadows. Felix, caught amid this altered reality, found himself in a world where all conventional understanding was turned on its head. Eris, the orchestrator of this chaos, observed the effects with a detached curiosity, her expression unreadable behind the lenses of her glasses. The world around her was her canvas, and she painted with broad strokes of order and disorder, creating a landscape that was both bewildering and mesmerizing. What's going on? Suddenly, Felix's expression changed for the worse after realizing that his spiritual connection with his mane had been cut off. He could no longer communicate with his mane or other wisps. What's worse? The link between him and Isna's core was severed too, which implied his main consciousness was cut off from fuel. The moment this happened, the real Felix felt the severance akin to a rope being snapped in his soul. His reaction was the same as his clone, incapable of believing what had just transpired. His reaction was an understatement. Did I just lose my clone? No, did I just lose a part of my soul? He sensed like his clone was no longer related to him and that the portion of his soul that controlled it was gone with it. He had no clue whether he got killed or captured, and it f***ed with his mind, which left a small opening for Hephaestus to take advantage of. Chance. Alas, before Hephaestus could commit, he got smashed in the face with a flaming knee, breaking his nose into pieces and sending his teeth flying everywhere. Opening or not, Felix was at a point of strength where even his mistakes could be corrected instantly. Still, Felix realized that he couldn't put his focus on his clone at the moment. The other Unigens must be rushing here at their top speed. Felix frowned coldly. I have to end this fight with whatever is left of my celestial energy and retain some for my escape. Aware that his reserves were dwindling, Felix knew he required to adapt his strategy and conclude the battle with Hephaestus swiftly. With a grim determination, Felix adjusted the intensity of his celestial flames. He reduced their brilliance, conserving the precious energy that remained. This decision, while necessary, meant relinquishing some of his overwhelming advantage. The flames, though less intense, still flickered around him. To compensate for this reduction, Felix unleashed a newfound ferocity in his physical attacks. Bam! Bam! Thud! Each punch and kick was delivered with even greater violence, a raw display of brute strength. Still, Hephaestus, sensing the shift in the tide of battle, discovered another glimmer of opportunity amidst his dire circumstances. I have to buy time to keep him here. He saw how his peers took off for his rescue with Zeus' assistance and understood that with his speed, he would arrive here in less than 2 seconds, which was in Unigen's senses 2 minutes or so. So, he roared at the top of his lungs furiously and began trading blows with Felix, using every ounce of his being to fight back. Alas, even with the celestial flames' intensity lowered and the gap in their power bridged by a bit, it was nowhere enough to rival Felix in his current form. After all, the celestial flames weren't the only thing enhancing Felix's strength, he had multiple symbols at work. This caused Felix's relentless assault to continue unabated, each strike bringing Hephaestus closer to his inevitable defeat through the roars and his desperate last attempts. This was not a movie where screaming and last-ditch efforts could magically turn the tide around. If he had the option to escape, then maybe, but with Asna's core glued to his, he was going nowhere without Felix. This sealed his fate, now, and forever. With one wretched scream that broke the sound barrier, Hephaestus's core, the very essence of his divine being, inexorably devoured by Asna's core at last. The last bit of it was consumed and Asna's core dimmed down and returned inside Felix, uncaring about the god of the forge, whose soul seemed to have left his rocky body. Hephaestus, now a mere shell of his former self, faced Felix with a mix of resignation and a faint glimmer of hope. As Hephaestus gathered the remnants of his courage to plead for his life, his eyes conveyed a depth of emotion that spoke of regret, fear, and a desperate wish to survive. He knew that as long as his core was within Asna's, he had no control over it, which in turn, created his existence subjected to Felix's mercy. In this moment of vulnerability, he sought to appeal to whatever mercy might reside in Felix's heart. I. Save your breath. But before Hephaestus could articulate his plea, Felix acted. With a cold and resolute expression, he delivered a final, devastating punch straight to Hephaestus's heart. The force of the blow was catastrophic, piercing through the god's body, and emerging from the other side. This act was not just a physical strike, it was a symbolic end to their bitter rivalry and a return of favor to how he killed his other clone. You will regret this. I will return. Remember me. Remember. As the last word left Hephaestus's mouth, Felix cast him aside like a discarded relic of a bygone era. The god's body, devoid of its core, began to disintegrate, succumbing to the reality of its mortality. The once mighty figure of Hephaestus crumbled, turning into black ashes carried away by an unseen wind. Each particle that drifted into the air was a poignant reminder of the impermanence of even the mightiest beings. As Felix watched Hephaestus's ashes scattered into the distance, he couldn't help but mutter to himself while activating his greed laws, "Are you watching, Asna? I am coming, step by step, but I am coming, just be patient with me, for I will never forsake you." As the Unigens created an appearance near the battlefield, the last sentence of Felix was the only thing they managed to obtain from this confrontation, echoing in their ears loudly as they watched the scathing ashes of their peer with deep frowns. They traded knowing gazes with each other as it finally dawned upon them that Felix wasn't a child who lost his way and came here, but someone with an agenda, someone who would not let anything stop him from achieving it, even if it meant massacring all the Unigens in the kingdom. We might need to rethink our plans and motives from this hunt. The Paragon has created it clear that he is coming for anyone who stands in his path. Athena uttered with a solemn tone as she eyed her peers, "So, are we going to free his path or reinforce our blockade? What's your choice?" 1657 One question for each. Meanwhile, inside that peculiar reality, where neither time nor anything made any sense, barely a nanosecond had gone by ever since Felix's clone capture. How did this happen? I am supposed to be protected by my celestial flames from any law-based effect. Felix's clone asked in his mind, but no one was there to answer him. He was left completely alone with Eris in this strange reality. It seems like that vixen hasn't taught you much about me. Eris commentated calmly akin to a disappointed mother, are you still on bad terms? Aren't you a bit short-sighted, little one? Whether you hate her for manipulating you or not, that shouldn't discourage you from using her knowledge to the fullest. After all, isn't your goal to defeat the three rulers and save your princess? It's doubtful you will achieve it even with her full support, don't even mention without it. Felix was left silent, having no clue what to retort with. This was their first ever meeting and not even a split second had passed. She had already berated him, questioned his love, and advised him all at once. She was the enemy, but didn't act like one in the slightest and seemed genuinely curious about his every motive, like this whole situation was an interesting experiment to her. Seeing that Felix wasn't responding and seemingly still processing this turn of events, Eris closed her tome and manifested a perfect cubic white table and chairs. Then, she sat down on one side and extended her hand to the other chair, offering with the guiding tone of an elder, "Sit down, your main consciousness has won his battle and retreated to safety. So, let's have a decent conversation, you seem somewhat lost in your quest." Felix glanced at her expressionless face and the chair for a moment, having no idea what to think. I can't trust her even if it seems like she means no harm. She is part of the upper celestials directly under the three rulers. All of this can be a facade. After what happened with Lilith, Felix had no interest in putting his trust in another Unigen regardless of how sincere they sounded. So, the first thought that came into his mind was to use his greed laws to get himself out by sacrificing what remained of celestial energy within him. However, he soon realized that his connection with the Seven Sins laws was also severed. Hey! It doesn't work, why doesn't it work? How couldn't it work? I am the paragon of sins. Those laws are mine and mine alone. Now, Felix began to feel pure dread rising in his heart as he gazed at Eris' expressionless face. Who could blame him? Unigens were the sole utilizers of their laws and not even the three rulers should be able to take away his powers to use them. That's something only the universe should have the power to do. How about you sit down now? Eris offered again calmly, I will help you understand. It's not like you left me any choice. Felix finally decided to accept her offer. I will answer one of your questions and you will answer mine. Eris offered, how does that sound? Felix nodded in acceptance without much hesitation. He understood that Eris must have some wicked powers in this reality, which might allow her to invade his memories or do much worse if she decided. Hence, it was best to cooperate willingly, at least, he would be getting some information back in this way. I already know your question, so allow me to answer it. Eris began, her voice steady and clear. Order and disorder are not merely forces, they are the fundamental underpinnings of all existence. They are the warp and weft upon which the tapestry of reality is woven. Order is the structure, the predictability, and the laws that govern the universe. Disorder, on the other hand, is the unpredictable, the random, the force that brings change and chaos. She paused for a moment, allowing Felix to absorb her words, then continued. You see, my power lies in the balance and manipulation of these two primal forces. I can create realms where order prevails, where everything follows a set pattern, or I can fashion a reality where disorder reigns, where predictability is thrown to the wind. Just like in this reality, where the Seven Sins laws have been erased. Erased? Felix was left stunned. He didn't think that even when he became a Unigen, there would come a day when his powers would be stripped off him by another. But at the same time, it made the most sense. What was the order? It was the set of rules and laws that the universe abides by. Disorder was the chaos produced when this order was destroyed. As the ruler of those two primal powers, she could change the rules and the laws to her pleasure in this reality, which meant in a sense, she was higher in universal control compared to Lilith. But, for such a magnificent and omnipotent power, the universe would not allow it to exist without a price. Eris gently tapped her book, which lay open on the table. This book is not just a collection of words. You can say it is a conduit of my power, a tool that allows me to shape reality according to the dictates of order and disorder. Just like your 7 sins laws had limitations imposed by the universe to maintain its balance, this book is my limitation. She shared, unbothered in the slightest above informing the enemy of her powers and weaknesses. Felix gazed at the book and asked with a confused look, how does it work exactly? How can a book limit you from using your powers? A Unigen. Felix could understand the universe setting rulers and structure for even Unigens. But at the same time, it gave them a choice to abuse them and break those rules as long as they could handle the punishment. But based on her wording, it seemed like she couldn't use her powers without the book as a conduit. 1 question for each, little paragon. Eris cracked a faint emotionless smile. Go ahead. Felix respected the deal even though his curiosity was eating him from the inside. I desire you to answer my first question. Eris questioned with a sincere tone, is your love between you and the exiled celestial a mere chemical reaction or something different? Let me rephrase, when you ascended and became a Unigen, the ruler of your own body, mind, and emotions, did you feel any change in your emotions toward her? While Felix couldn't utilize his laws, as the paragon of sins, his sense of evil intent or negative emotions was at its peak in the universe. This made him able to discern that Eris wasn't feeding him with rubbish information and was being genuine. At least, this what was his senses told him, and this made him opt to share the truth as well to gain more useful information from her. Truthfully, my feelings were the same while I was a mortal, became a deity, and after I ascended to a Unigen. Felix answered with a serious tone, in fact, they only have gotten stronger with time, and I never once felt like it was a byproduct of a chemical reaction that I can control. It's more than that, it's spiritual, like she is my genuine soulmate, and without her, I will never feel complete again. I don't understand how to describe it any better than this. No need, you have already described it to perfection. Eris placed her fingers under her chin thoughtfully and stayed silent for a moment. Interesting, if his answer can be used as a piece of evidence, then it seems like the prophecy might have some truth to it. What is it? Felix frowned after realizing that this question might not be as innocent and useless as it seemed to him. Is this your second question? Just as Felix was about to give her a head nod, she added, for your information, my questions regarding you aren't that many, so, choose carefully. Also, I will answer only questions regarding me. In other words, she found only a few things about him intriguing, and after getting her answers, she wouldn't bother to entertain him any longer. This changed everything for Felix, as he knew that such an opportunity to learn more about the inner parts of the upper celestial realm. He tried to utilize his greed laws before to find out about the 3 rulers in Asna's situation, but the universe refused to give him answers because he hadn't ascended yet. After ascending, those questions related to the 3 rulers seemed akin to a taboo, as the universe made it clear that the only way for him to find out was through abusing his laws. Felix refused to put himself in a slumber either now or never, knowing that if it happened, the 3 rulers would not sit by and watch. No one would be there to protect him during his slumber besides Lord Hades, who was already extremely weakened and serving his punishment. So, he postponed it for later. I desire to understand how you managed to bypass the celestial flame's effects, and if I can achieve it too, Felix queried with a solemn expression. In Felix's view, bypassing celestial flames would enable him to do the same for divinities. This was significant, considering that his 3 mortal enemies were their owners. 1658 One question for each. 2. Eris looked directly at Felix, her eyes sharp yet revealing a hint of the vast knowledge she possessed. In the end, she couldn't help but break a faint chortle at the thought of him asking her about the ways to defeat the 3 rulers while knowing she was part of their assembly. You see, celestial energy is the sole entity outside of the universe's order and system. However, the moment celestial energy turns into flames, divinities, or whatnot, it becomes part of the universal order, bound by its laws. She explained, anything part of the universe's order is under my jurisdiction, obviously, within limits. Doesn't this make you more powerful than the three rulers? Felix sucked a deep cold breath. Felix always had a notion that the union of order and disorder would be on a different level of omnipotence. Still, not in his wildest dreams did he expect that she would even be able to affect the celestial flames and divinities. Don't be silly now. Eris shook her head. You know very little of the three rulers' true powers, and it seems like you mistake their strength to be all related to their divinities. Then, Eris waved her finger, making him understand that she would not discuss anything related to the three rulers as per the rules. Felix dropped the subject at once, not wanting to push his luck. Still, the question bore a hole in his mind, making him feel like he was treading on a much more foreign territory than he thought. As for if you can break apart the celestial flames or the divinity's effects, well, that's a question for Lilith, not me. Eris advised with a tint of irritation in her tone, that Vixen might be manipulative and borderline psycho, but she knows more than she shows. Unless you receive her help, you will never reach the true potential of the seven sins laws. Felix knitted his eyebrows in response, showing that he wasn't too pleased with the suggestion. But at the same time, he began to understand that seeking that witch's help was something inevitable. It took him so much just to deal with Hephaestus, and while he understood that unions were never supposed to be easy to defeat, it still didn't sit right with him. After all, his end goal was always the three rulers, and if he wanted to even touch their heels, he had to go the extra mile. If it meant lowering his pride and kissing Lilith's ass for her assistance, then so be it. Still, this wouldn't change his plan to snap her neck at the first opportunity presented. His hatred runs way too deep. My turn. Eris interrupted his thoughts with a deep question that seemed irrelevant to her. If I may ask, what's your purpose? What do you mean? Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise, knowing that she wasn't asking about Isna. You know what I mean. Felix went quiet. The question roamed in his mind akin to a wandering ghost, refusing to let go of its grip on him. He knew that the simpler answer would be to live with Isna in a cozy place, free of problems, free of danger, and free of anyone's authority and control. But, this was never always his purpose or his aspiration. He had lived a previous life before he met Isna, and in that life, he should have possessed a purpose unrelated to anyone. But, no matter how he tried to remember it, no matter how he tried to think of it, nothing came to his mind. It was like he was a robot, just experiencing life, instead of living it. Even the purpose of becoming strong to avoid what happened to him in the ruins occurred at the end of his life and the beginning of his new one. Or becoming the supreme leader of the Alliance, that was a universal dream for every bloodliner or fighter in the universe, and it wasn't unique to him. Even reaching the peak to help his race evolve was nothing but a purpose decided out of his childlike pride of being a human. He thought, and in the end, Felix realized, that throughout his life, he had many purposes, but not a single one could be said to have spoken to his inner self. A purpose that could be his identity and make him feel like he was a unique entity regardless of his universal status or strength. None. Was I always like this? Being moved by the wind of destiny, just floating by, and accepting whatever happens in my path as normal? Who am I? Felix tightened his eyebrows in confusion, feeling a bit lost and weirded out. Just one question was enough to make him question his entire identity if he had any, yet again. He understood that even if he succeeded in saving Isna, killing the three rulers, and freeing himself and her from anyone's authority, nothing would change in him. He would be happier to live with her and maybe even start a family, but this wouldn't change the fact that he was living his entire life without a single purpose from the start to the end. He fell into the same identity crisis as the primogenitors when they had already done and achieved everything they desired, leaving them seeking their true purpose in this life. While their true purpose didn't please a single one of them after finding out, they had at least moved on from their eternal search and all they needed to do was either accept it or not. When Eris saw how lost Felix was and how he was incapable of answering such a simple question, she couldn't help but sigh to herself, how sorrowful, if this is the price of loneliness, the price is a bit too steep. No one knew if she was feeling sorry for Felix, herself, or something else. Whatever it was, she had the same reaction as Lord Zervan during Felix's battle against Nemo's alter ego. She soon came to Felix's rescue and pulled him out of those existential crisis thoughts. "You can drop it and ask me one last thing," Eris said as she tapped on her wrist, gesturing that time was running thin. "This reality is separated from the outside and the three leaders can't hear or see anything, but it's best not to push our luck. I have no interest in being questioned by them." "Ah, okay." Felix shook his head and regained control over his thoughts and emotions, burying this faint existential crisis at the depth of his heart. Nothing changed at the moment and his goal was still to save his woman and get rid of the three rulers. He could wonder about the rest after fulfilling them. After all, if he failed, nothing would matter anyway. Felix thought deeply and hard about his next inquiry, but at the same time, he didn't take long to decide on it. He looked into Eris' eyes and asked with a solemn tone, "Do you know what's on the other side?" This was an inquiry that neither Lord Hades nor Lilith answered, not even the universe answered him after he used his greed laws. This made him believe that maybe no one knew about it either, not even the three rulers, but at the same time, he refused to believe in this theory. Why? He couldn't accept the thought that the three rulers would go this far for something they had no clue about. He couldn't accept the notion that Asna was treated like sh*t by them ever since her birth and even in her adulthood for an ending that could be anything. What if it was just nothingness? What if it was just another part of the universe? What if it was a mere small dimension? Alas! Eris looked at him dead in the eye, knowing exactly what was going through his mind, and uttered indifferently, "Boy, for the three rulers, their freedom is worth more than the universe." Asna. She scoffed, if the prophecy uttered the only way to reach the other side is through destroying the universe, they would have done it by now even if there was nothing there. Prophecy? What are you talking about? Felix was taken aback by hearing this term. Too bad, Eris had no intention to continue this conversation. She waved her hand and the pocket actualness seemed to fall apart on itself. It was a pleasant conversation. Eris closed her book and stood up from the table, uncaring about Felix who seemed to be stretching apart like he was made out of rubber. "What's happening to me?" Felix asked with a startled tone as he gazed at his stretching arms, feeling not an ounce of pain. "Until we meet again, little paragon." Eris merely waved her hand as she walked through a chaotic portal. Just as she went out, she popped her head back in and answered calmly, "To answer your question, I have no idea what is on the other side either." The moment she uttered this, the chaotic portal closed, and the actualness pocket collapsed on itself, taking Felix with it painlessly. Even after everything that happened, Eris not at all had any intentions of letting Felix's clone stay alive. Well, this isn't so bad either. Felix closed his eyes one last time, and when he opened them again, the environment before him changed into a massive leafless dead forest with a dried-up lake in front. What an interesting character! Felix murmured to himself after reviewing the memories of his clone. 1659 A forced unanimous decision. Did something happen? Elder Kraken asked what was in everyone's minds, understanding that Felix's comment was out of place, especially when not even a second had gone by after his teleportation concluded. "It's my clone." Felix went on and narrated what happened between him and the Unigen of Order and Disorder. When he was done, everyone had a different reaction to Eris' mannerisms and lack of aggression. "It seems like she isn't really on the three rulers' side." Ramongendra commentated. "That four-eyed dull woman is on no one's side." Lilith remarked lazily, "You should feel glad she didn't keep you trapped in her reality and run some experiments on you, that's all she cares about." The moment she said this, everyone turned to glance at Lady Sphinx in silence. Lady Sphinx's eyelids twitched, knowing that they were comparing her similar personality with hers. After witnessing her omnipotent powers in action, I have indeed made out through her mercy. Felix couldn't agree more. He realized that if even his celestial flames were useless against her powers, there was really nothing much he could have done the instant he entered her reality. She could enslave his clone and do whatever it wanted with it, and the worst part? He wouldn't be able to recover him even if he cancelled his wrath symbol. How could it work when she had the power to erase his laws on her reality and cut off their spiritual connection? She is extremely dangerous. No, she is a different monster compared to Hephaestus, and it's best to keep my distance from her in the future. Felix decided with a solemn tone. Even though his experience with her was pleasant and peaceful, and she seemed to harbor no evil intent at him, he had no intentions of putting his trust in her. His trust was too difficult to earn at the moment, and unless someone literally did the unspeakable for him, he would never be able to trust him even by 10%. Knowing that time wasn't in his favor at the moment, Felix pushed the subject to the back of his mind for later and focused on relocating himself and his base to a new safe location. He released his spiritual pressure until it covered millions of kilometers and stopped only after finding a massive active volcano, surrounded by nothing but its smog, ashes, and darkened desolate surface. In his eyes, with Hephaestus being removed from existence, anything related to fire was his next perfect location, whether he succeeded in the next ascension and obtained Hephaestus's laws or not. He took a single step forward and then he appeared at the base of the volcano. With the snap of a finger, he used the equal trade symbol to sacrifice some of the dreamers and world eaters to move his people here. In almost an instant, Nemo, Candace, Arthur, the rest of the councilmen, the void citizens, and what remained of the non-intelligent void creatures, all appeared behind him. Daddy! Nemo instantly jumped into Felix's embrace, and after a few excited rubs on his cheek, he sat on his shoulders, dangling his small legs on Felix's chest. Felix caught and played with his tiny feet with a gentle smile planted on his face. Without a change of expression, he addressed everyone in front of him. The mission has been concluded successfully and the god of fire has been disposed of. Candace, the ruiner, Arthur, and the rest of the void citizens were all left with speechless looks, having no idea how to react to his overwhelming statement when he said it in such a manner. Everyone imagined this moment to be epic and glorious, with their god emerging victorious and giving them a speech that would inspire them to work even harder after pulling the impossible. Yet, there he was, fooling around with Nemo, akin to a stern grandpa turning into a soft jelly after meeting his grandchildren. No reaction? As expected of my citizens, your standards are just as high as mine. But don't worry, this is just the beginning and we won't stop until we bring the entire kingdom to its knees. Now, let's build our new base. Felix gave them a thumbs up with a satisfied expression and then turned around to walk toward the volcano while asking Nemo about what he had done in his day. Candace and the rest of the void citizens remained silent for a few seconds, not knowing whether to cry or laugh. That's my god for ye! The ruiner laughed loudly as he chased after Felix, unbothered by the whole situation. It is what it is. When they saw this, Candace and the rest could only share some bitter and wry smiles amongst each other before following behind their god, feeling like farmers returning home after a difficult harvest instead of warriors returning from war. Meanwhile, near the Eternal Kingdom's gate, the Unigens were still gathered there in a small circle. Every one of them had a solemn expression. It was understandable, as they had just been contacted by the three rulers and got delivered with an ultimatum that went like this. The situation with Isna's core has escalated. You, the great Unigens, have been granted the task of retrieving Isna's core. This mission is of paramount importance, and yet, it seems that the seriousness of this task has not been fully grasped. We are offering you one final opportunity to take this hunt seriously and bring us Isna's core. Your efforts thus far have been lacking. Either grasp the opportunity or return the celestial cages. The ruler's words hung heavy in the air, a clear ultimatum to the Unigens. There was an underlying threat in their message. If the Unigens failed to accomplish this crucial task, the rulers themselves would intervene and take matters into their own hands. Although they didn't value their honor or pride, having their reliability questioned was unsettling and shameful. However, emotional manipulation was not enough to convince the Unigens to continue their hunt. It would take more than that. What a hassle, it's no longer even about the promotion. Demeter rubbed her eyelids in irritation. The Paragon's actions have shown great aggression and I doubt he will halt his operation of saving the exiled anytime soon. As long as he plans to fight against the three rulers, he will need an immense amount of celestial energy. Athena shook her head. I doubt he will dare get close to the celestial city ever again without the necessary preparation, which would leave him with the sole option of continuing to target us. In other words, even if the Unigens wanted to drop off from the hunt and mind their business in their environment, Felix wouldn't allow them to. The only way to avoid having a battle with him was by agreeing to willingly share their celestial energy with him. That's something none of them had any intention of doing ever. It wasn't even about choosing sides in this brazen confrontation anymore, it was about their protection against the invader. If Felix was right here in front of them, he would agree with their take. He had no intentions of being at peace with any Unigen that stood in his path, which meant, that the day he decided to invade a territory and absorb celestial energy, they could either close their eyes and let it happen or arm up and take him on. However, there is another route to take and everybody knew deep down what it was. Yet, none of them even bothered to entertain the notion of it. If swearing my alliance with him and joining his cause is the only way to avoid having my celestial energy absorbed, I would rather take him on 10 times out of 10. This thought coursed through everyone's minds as they gazed through their scouts at Felix's old empty void base. In another sense, while they didn't care regarding either party if they were forced to choose one from the other, they would always pick the three rulers without an ounce of hesitation. If anyone knew which they knew regarding the three rulers, they would pick them every time. I guess it's unanimous. Athena didn't have to say much to figure out everyone's decision. Let's get rid of the vermin and return to our routine. Zeus uttered indifferently as him walked away, contact me as you locate him. 1660 The Second Ascension. Not so fast. Athena stopped him. What will we do with Apollo and Poseidon? Zeus turned around with the same expression and shared his opinion. Let them be. I doubt either of them would take advantage of our involvement to conquer our territories. Demeter added, plus, Apollo is unreliable, and having him with us is worse than not. Poseidon has just conquered an entire domain and will use everything in his power to reinforce and defend it from us before the arrival of the next celestial ceremony. If everyone feels like this, then so be it. Athena left one last remark with a stern tone, spread out your scouts and be ready to make a move at first notice. We have to catch him before he builds enough resources for more wishes. Everyone gave head nods in approval and took off, returning to their territories at last. The only difference between their current search and before was the seriousness of it. Now, even when they didn't trust each other, this time, none of them had plans to stay in their territories after discovering Felix's location. It wasn't needed to be said, but after the decision was made, anyone who broke the unspoken truce would get ganged up upon. Meanwhile, in the dual city of darkness and light, Apollo was seen reclined leisurely on a grand, fluffy circular bed. The bed, an opulent centerpiece in his lavishly decorated chamber, was like a cloud of luxury, its softness and comfort befitting a deity of his stature. Surrounding Apollo were several gorgeous women, each embodying an ethereal beauty that seemed to blur the lines between reality and divine fantasy. They were semi-naked, their attire a delicate array of silks and gossamer that accentuated their celestial forms. These gorgeous attendants were engrossed in their tasks, dedicated to ensuring Apollo's comfort and pleasure. Some of the women gently massaged Apollo's shoulders and arms, their skilled hands working to soothe any tension in his muscles. Others among the attendants fed Apollo with an assortment of fruits, each piece a heavenly delight bursting with flavor. Apollo accepted these offerings with a relaxed demeanor, savoring the taste of each fruit as if it were a rare delicacy. All the while, Apollo was engaged in playing his lyre, the score he played was the same one he had performed during the recent battle, a composition that had resonated with the tumult and majesty of the celestial conflict. The music flowed from his fingers with a natural ease, the melodies weaving through the air, filling the chamber with a hauntingly beautiful sound. As he played, his eyes occasionally closed in contemplation, lost in the memories of the battle and the emotions it had evoked. When he reached the harrowing part of the score where he lost control, his fingers seemed incapable of playing the same notes. He struggled and struggled but to no avail. "Ah, you had to ruin it too." Apollo sighed in frustration as he placed the lyre to the side. "Why did you even come out? What did you see?" His left eye suddenly turned pitch black and an eerie low voice resounded in his ears, resembling a whisper of the Grim Reaper. "He can help us, he can achieve our dream. You still refuse to let that go. What do you mean by our dream?" Apollo scoffed in irritation. "It's your dream, I am pleasantly happy with my current life." The eerie voice released a harrowing crackle that could freeze anyone's soul in fear. "Then," he said, "I am the beginning and you are the end. You can keep me trapped down there for all you want. A day will come when nothing but darkness remains. Whether you want to be part of it or not, it will come. Just leave me alone, you are insanity itself." Apollo waved his hand in irritation, shaking off the voice from his mind. His attempt seemed to have worked as his eye reverted to normal again. "Is everything all right, my lord?" one of the beautiful maidens massaging his shoulders asked with a soft voice. "Hearing your voice made everything all right again," Apollo said with a faint charming smirk as he pulled the girl into his arms, causing her to let out an embarrassed yelp. Then, he started doing some naughty things to her with his graceful well-trained fingers, making her release some not too PG voices. Soon, multiple giggles and moans began to echo in the chamber. While Apollo was having his fun, his mind was still weirdly on Felix, his image refusing to leave his mind. How can he be the solution to that lunatic's goal? He murmured in his mind, having a strong feeling that his relationship with Felix was about to get a bit more complicated than he anticipated. A couple of minutes later, deep within the bowels of a colossal volcano, Felix and his people transformed the rugged and fiery underground into a sprawling base. The massive cave that they sculpted out was awe-inspiring in its scale. Towering walls of solid rock, hardened by centuries of volcanic activity, enclosed a vast expanse that buzzed with the activity of Felix's followers. The air was warm and thick, filled with the earthy scent of minerals and the faint, sulfuric aroma of the volcano. Lava rivers snaked through the cave, their molten paths casting an eerie, reddish glow that illuminated the cavernous space. The remaining behemoths were left to feed above the surface of the wasteland. With the Eternal Kingdom's miraculous recovery rate, the World Eaters were having a feast. Right now, Felix was sitting in a mediation position on a standardized void throne while he had only one clone be responsible for the acceleration of the void creature's creation. He couldn't afford to have any more clones as his soul was pretty damaged after losing multiple of them and it was best to wait until it recovered. "Lord Hades, I hope you watched," Felix spoke to himself with a faint smile. While Felix wasn't aiming to get revenge for Lord Hades' sake directly, it still felt good to return some of the favor shown to him by Lord Hades. Unfortunately, Lord Hades didn't bother to respond to him. "Leave him be." Elder Kraken chuckled, his only reaction to your victory was cracking a faint smile for less than a millisecond. Then, he returned to his expressionless face. "That's fine by me." Felix smiled. Knowing Lord Hades' personality wasn't the type to show emotions on almost anything, Felix wasn't too bothered by the lack of communication. For now, he had other problems. "What should I do with this now?" Felix murmured with a hand on his chin as he eyed the massive fiery core in the sky of Asna's core space. The core was unlike Lilith or Asna, it was like a bubbling star with plasma waves and solar flares. He comprehended that the next step was to test out the ascension possibility, but at the same time, this was unprecedented and no one could tell what would happen if he committed. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Just because the first ascension went smoothly, it didn't mean the second one would be the same. It all depends on the universe, really. Lady Sphinx remarked, if there is a loophole as we theorized, then nothing bad will happen, if not, I doubt it will even respond to you. Seems like it. Felix nodded. He comprehended that unlike the origin realm or other breakthroughs, he had no control over the ascension process. The universe was the one starting it before, as Felix was merely attempting to enter the origin realm. I think it's best to switch my consciousness to one of Hydra tails before I do it. Felix inquired for feedback. It might help make the universe choose me as the next candidate easier. Try it, you have nothing to lose. Felix bestowed a head nod and started the process straight away, understanding that if the Unigens were truly intelligent, they would not give him any more space or freedom to grow. Thus, he had to be quick and start the process before they intensified their hunting attempts. Soon, Felix summoned the 7 Hydra tails and then switched his focus to the wrathful dragon tail, allowing him to start seeing and feeling reality from its perspective. Then, without an ounce of hesitation, he commenced the ascension by requesting the core to be moved into the dragon's heart, which was connected with the wrathful Hydra tail. The moment Hephaestus' core settled in nicely within the dragon's heart, the universe seemed to take notice almost immediately. Felix immediately felt a surge of intense power coursing through him. The wrathful Hydra tail and the dragon's heart underwent the most dramatic changes. He could feel the dragon's heart pulsating fiercely, transforming into something extraordinary. It's changing, Felix muttered, feeling the heart morph into a piece of cracked flesh, with rivulets of lava-like energy flowing through the fissures. The sensation was both exhilarating and overwhelming. It's really happening. Lord Shiva commentated with slightly widened eyes. The rest of the tenants shared the same reaction as him, understanding that this was going to change everything. Even without a consciousness, how can the universe allow this? Lord Loki noted with a startled tone, this goes against its entire order and rules. 1661 The Second Ascension. 2. In his eyes, the entire universe operated on balance and order to the point, even the Unigens were under duty chains to keep them in check. Yet, here he was, watching as Felix, a human, proceeded to his second ascension and the second bestowal of Unigens' divine gifts. The universe does care about balance more than anything, Lilith responded with a causal tone while licking a pink lollipop seductively. While it has no consciousness to reason that Felix shouldn't possess 2 cores just because he has the candidacy attributes, it will weaken the gifts provided during the ascension to maintain its balance. You mean like the bestowed strength and such? Thor asked with great difficulty, like he couldn't stomach the thought of talking to Lilith. Yep. Lilith nodded, he obtained 25 million BF before and I am certain this time, he will probably obtain half of it or even less. The same will happen to other gifts. The tenants seemed to understand and agree with her take as they had their own dealings with the universe's way of doing things. Just like anything it created, the balance was at its helm. Dragons were powerful, but low in numbers and cursed with uncontrollable pride. Humans were born with a massive talent, but no cultivation system, no superhuman strength, or mental fortitude powerful enough to move objects. All they had was their intelligence, strong adaptability, and cockroach-like reproduction system sprinkled with strong desires to own everything. Elves had reproduction problems and were too trusting. Slimes were near unkillable with their rejuvenation powers, but their strength was utterly useless. The same theory could be applied to any and every race born in this universe. In the same manner, it was impossible to allow a person to obtain 2 or multiple Unigen cores without changing anything about the enhancements provided. Otherwise, by the 5th ascension, Felix would be at 100 million BF without using a single drop of celestial energy to empower himself. It's still more than worth it. His new laws won't be touched and they are the real reward. Lord Loki remarked as he watched Felix grunt while enduring the transformation, his body resonating with the raw power of the ascension. Ruoar. The wrathful Hydra tail began its metamorphosis at last, each scale cracking and turning into ashen magma. Lava dripped down its surface, glowing with an intense heat that mirrored the volcanic environment of the base. The Hydra tail, it's evolving. Candace observed aloud, a tone of awe in her voice. The tail's horns ignited with blue flames, casting a brilliant light that danced around the room. The flames formed a scorching aura around the tail, a fiery spectacle that symbolized the fusion of Felix's essence with Hephaestus' core. As the ascension reached its climax, Felix felt a deep connection with the universe, a silent acknowledgement of his transformation. The room was filled with the light of the transformation, casting long shadows against the rocky walls. The lava rivers and magma pools seemed to respond to Felix's ascension, their glow intensifying as if in recognition of the monumental event taking place. Finally, the transformation was complete. Felix opened his eyes, now imbued with a newfound power and presence. The wrathful Hydra tail and the dragon's heart had become integral parts of his being, transformed into embodiments of celestial might. Felix stood up, feeling the weight and potential of his new form even when his appearance hadn't changed. It was like the Hydra tail was the only one going through the ascension. Ruyumbal. Just as he wanted to comment on the transformation, a sudden universal thunderclap echoed through the cosmos, a sonic manifestation of the monumental event. Its reverberations were felt across the entirety of the universe, touching every realm and being within it. It's official now. Lady Sphinx remarked with a serious tone, Hephaestus is dead and will no longer return. This was the same thought that went through everyone involved. Before, even after Felix got rid of Hephaestus' soul, he still had the chance to return in the far future if Felix ever lost control over his core. That's why Hephaestus said he would return and he should remember him, confident that no matter what Felix did, he would always return. But now? Felix was considered officially by the universe as the new guardian of fire and magma. In other words, if the core was lost and Felix's soul was gone, he would be the one returning in the far future. Well, this won't sit well with the other Unigens, Felix remarked with a faint cold smirk, understanding that they were smart enough to figure out the truth on their own. Such a universal realm across Thunderclap resounded only for such scenarios connected to Unigens, and at this moment, there weren't many options to choose from. As he expected, the instant the thunderclap landed in the Unigens' ears, every one of them frowned their eyebrows and gazed into the distance with a tint of puzzlement in their eyes. After a few moments of brainstorming on the source of the thunderclap, their hearts skipped a beat after realizing that only one option could explain the timing. Impossible, that's just impossible. Second ascension. Was this his reason for targeting Hephaestus' core? It can't be. The universe will never allow such a blatant break of its order, never. No one dared to believe their assumption even if it was the only feasible outcome. Without hesitation, they reached out to the three rulers and requested their confirmation, knowing that Felix should be on their radar. The three rulers neither seemed impressed nor surprised by the whole matter, they merely reported back with an indifferent tone, he has ascended again. It was like they already knew Felix was going for it and would succeed in pulling it off. After Athena, Zeus, and the rest received their confirmation, they sat on their thrones in utter silence. Even with a confirmation, it was still too difficult for them to accept it. A Unigen with control over 8 types of laws was already too strong in their eyes, and now he was geared up with the laws of fire, magma, plasma, and anything connected to heat. How could they acknowledge it? If he still can continue with multiple ascensions somehow, then, he will be coming for us, not for our celestial energy but for our cores. Aeolus gulped a mouthful in dread, having a slight feeling of being a prey creeping up on him. This was the first time he ever sensed like his life was in danger, since no one could kill Unigens even if their souls were erased. But this was different. He made the universe consider him as the second replacement without giving it the chance to even consider reviving the dead Unigen. In another sense, it would lead them to a true death, and none of them had ever considered about it before or were ready mentally to acknowledge such a damning fate. Change of plans. Athena reached out to all Unigens at once and uttered with a cold tone, "This is a matter of life and death now. We are in the presence of not an invader but a Unigen slayer. Use everything to find him and take him out before he grows stronger than our reach." Poseidon, Apollo, this is also connected to your life and I refuse to have you stay it out. I ain't planning on doing that. Poseidon replied coldly. After finding out that Hephaestus was dead for real and his laws stolen, Poseidon realized that Felix might prioritize returning his territory from him. He had no intention of waiting until he showed up before his front step. I will search for him too. Apollo interjected with a serious tone. While he really wanted to find Felix, he didn't mention that it was for the other reason. His peers were satisfied with his involvement, knowing that the search would be much easier with him. One day, we have to locate him in less than a day. Athena finished the discussion with a cold statement, he needs to be caught before he can get used to Hephaestus' laws. 1662 Awakening the Sleeping Beauty. Meanwhile, in distant areas of the universe, Felix's friends, including Selphie, Olivia, Noah, and Carbuncle, paused in their activities as the thunderclap reached them, their expressions shifted to one of awe and realization. He must be kicking ass up there. Noah commentated with a little smirk before he continued on his eternal search, still nowhere close to reaching his little sister's spirit. Felix, I hope you are okay. Selphie and Olivia shared a bit of concern as they knew that the thunderclap could represent an achievement or an announcement. If Felix had fallen, they were certain the universe would announce it. It sure announced something, and that was the death of Hephaestus. The rest of the people continued with their daily lives after a few minutes of wonderment, already used to such thunderclaps by now, it became part of their lives. Back in the cave under the active volcano, Felix could be seen addressing his people. Due to certain circumstances, we are obliged to pack up again and leave this area. Felix announced with a solemn tone, this time, we will need to be constantly on the move. Thus, we will ride on the World Eaters and start journeying across the outer space of the wasteland non-stop. Felix thought he could stay here for a day or two before they changed locations, but after he succeeded in the ascension, he knew that was no longer an option. He was certain that the Unigens would find their base in less than a couple of hours if they put their entire mind into it. At least, if they were on the move, it would be much easier to react and escape than being stuck under a volcano. Candace and the others had nothing to complain about and started packing up again. After they finished, everyone moved up to the top of a symbiote and Felix commanded it to head up, away from the surface of the Eternal Kingdom. This would minimize all chances for Unigens to locate them, as most of their reach was limited in the Eternal Kingdom. After all, Artemis, Demeter, Aeolus, Zeus, and even Athena didn't have their related laws in outer space to send scouts and such. After half a day of non-stop searching for Felix and his people across the entire surface area of the Eternal Kingdom's wasteland, all the Unigens lifted their heads and gazed into the sky with irked expressions. He is planning to slow down the game and stay on the low, Zeus expressed coldly, not too pleased with this result. I would have done the same in his position. Athena sighed, he has taken advantage of us underestimating him to take down Hephaestus and steal his powers. Now, he knows we are in this for real and wouldn't come down unless he was confident in his preparation to take down at least two of us at once. She was correct. Felix's next plan was to lay low in outer space and get stronger by mastering his old and new laws before daring to target another Unigen. His fight with Hephaestus and talk with Eris made him understand that he needed to evolve his game at all costs if he wanted to keep going forward. Otherwise, even if he had multiple laws, he would still fail to defeat another Unigen who had control over a single law. Mastery and battle experience mattered way too much in those fights. Especially, when the same strategy to farm up celestial energy in the celestial city wasn't going to work again. Don't give up on the search, Athena said with stern tone. Although she understood it was a long shot they would be able to locate Felix ever again, it was better to keep trying than not. Meanwhile, in the serene expanse of an ethereal realm, where time seemed to stand still, Asna lay in a state of deep slumber, her form enveloped in a gentle, luminescent glow. She was the epitome of divine grace, her appearance exceeding the mere concept of beauty. Asna's hair flowed around her like a cascade of liquid flames, shimmering with each subtle movement, reflecting the soft light that bathed her resting place. Her skin glowed with an inner radiance, hinting at the immense power that lay dormant within her. The universal thunderclap, its reverberations were powerful enough, they managed to awaken Asna from her slumber. The moment the sound touched her, the serene glow that surrounded her intensified, as if responding to the call of the cosmos. Asna's eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes that held the depth of the universe within them. They sparkled with a myriad of colors, each shift of her gaze akin to witnessing the birth and death of stars. As she rose from her resting state, the ethereal realm around her seemed to brighten, the very air charged with the anticipation of her awakening. He is here. Awareness flooded into Asna's consciousness, her thoughts immediately turning to Felix. A complex array of emotions played across her divine features: surprise, concern, but above all, an undying affection for the lover who dared to traverse the path of the Celestials for her sake. The reason of her emergence from slumber was twofold: the thunderous announcement of Felix's second ascension and the presence of her core now within the Eternal Kingdom. She was forced into slumber in the first place because the Eternal Kingdom wasn't linked with the rest of the universe. But now? She could feel her core a little. Asna stood, her form radiant and majestic, a goddess in every sense of the word. "Felix," she whispered, her voice carrying a melody that could soothe the fiercest storms. "Where are you?" She tried her best to access out to Felix, but to no avail. She came to realize that the celestial pocket dimension was also sealed from the Eternal Kingdom. This made her able to feel her core's presence, but not control it, send a message through it or anything of the sort. While she couldn't communicate with him, Felix was able to feel her presence through her core the instant she opened her eyes. It was like her core came slightly alive. This sudden awareness struck Felix with the force of a comet, leaving him shocked, excited, and overwhelmed with a torrent of emotions. His heart surged with a mixture of joy and longing, the sensation of Asna's presence igniting hope and desire he had kept carefully guarded. Without hesitation, Felix reached out, calling into the vast expanse of the universe. "Asna!" His voice, laden with emotion, sought to bridge the cosmic distances between them, to touch her, to confirm that the connection was real. But his call met only the silence of the celestial realm, his words dissipating into the void without reaching Asna. In that moment of poignant longing, Lilith remarked with a nonchalant tone, "Stop squandering your breath. She can't hear you, not as long as she persists in the celestial pocket dimension. It must be sealed too." Felix sighed, the initial shock of Asna's faint presence giving way to a mix of frustration and resignation. The reality of Lilith's words settled over him like a cold shroud. Despite the incredible journey he had undertaken, the barriers between him and Asna remained formidable. "At least, you can feel her presence now." Thor comforted, "You know that she is awake and well." Felix nodded with a faint bitter smile and a hand placed on his heart, feeling like Asna was with him again, watching over him like always. For now, that was enough to keep him at peace. 1663 The Celestial Ceremony. Felix didn't even consider seeking a way to help Asna leave the celestial realm, as he knew that was a near impossibility. The three rulers were always inside the realm, guarding the universe's heart, and Felix had no plans to put himself in their hands so soon. Still, he tried to find other ways at least to communicate with her and see how was she doing. "Just drop it, as long as the celestial realm is sealed, nothing will work," Lilith advised. Felix remained silent. He already knew that the seals would make any plan or method fail miserably. That's why he chose the only time when it was widely known that the celestial realm remained open for a decent period. "You are thinking about doing something during the celestial ceremony?" Lilith raised an eyebrow in surprise. "How bold, you truly don't fear death." Everyone showed the same reaction as Lilith, giving Felix startled looks. "Isn't that where all citizens of the Eternal Kingdom gather? Including the Unigens and three rulers?" Thor sucked a deep breath. "How are you planning to make a move during it?" Everyone knew that the celestial ceremony was one of the most important events in the Eternal Kingdom. It was the only time when the three rulers accepted all the collected celestial energy from their territories and traded it off for a percentage of their divinities. It was held every century for the sake of collecting a decent portion before trading it off. This was also where new mortals were blessed by the three rulers with some divinities for their achievements unrelated to their gods. Yet, the most played out and significant event was the celestial duel. It was the only legal and approved method by everyone for the Unigens to steal celestial energy from their peers without touching their territories. It was through a direct challenge between Unigens, where both parties needed to agree. The winner was rewarded with the decided portion of the other. Most Unigens participated on it only for entertainment purposes between them, since they wouldn't need to worry about their territories while in battle. Under the attendance of the three rulers, most Unigens behaved themselves. I don't aware yet, but I know there must be a way to manipulate the ceremony to our advantage. Felix replied with narrowed eyes. In Felix's mind, the Unigens and the three rulers would never postpone the ceremony due to him. While this would provide him a chance to prepare ahead and take advantage, it also meant that all of them were confident he wouldn't be able to harm them in any fashion. Even if he decided to pay a visit to their territories to steal celestial energy. In other words, the three rulers are going to be guarding all the Unigens' territories in case one of them decided to be funny. Felix shared, this means the three rulers wouldn't hesitate to strike me, no matter how much celestial energy was going to cost them. It's way riskier than going to the ceremony. Thor stressed on his point, at least during the ceremony, they might not bother to make a move while everyone was around. Everyone believed the same, knowing that it was better to ride this wave of nonchalance from the three rulers than poke them. I will ponder of something. Felix murmured the last part, I have to check on her, I have to. A couple of months later. In the vast, silent expanse of outer space, where the darkness is punctuated only by the distant twinkle of stars and the infinite peace of land, Felix could be seen sitting on the top of the world-eater raccoon's head. He allowed Nemo to practice his laws through playing with the behemoths, and he wasn't pulling his hands. I guess we are somewhat further now to create a real star. Felix to himself as he glanced at the far-away eternal kingdom. He spent the past months fooling around with fire, magma, plasma, and anything else heat-related. While he had enjoyed himself, he had yet to create a star without worrying about nothing. After all, with the Unigens' senses, it would take only one of them to be gazing at the sky to realize the addition of a new star. At least, now, he had the chance to teleport away if he got caught. Without hesitation, Felix extended his hands, palms facing outward. His focus was intense, a concentration so profound it seemed to bend the very fabric of space around him. The energy from Hephaestus' core coursed through him, a turbulent river of divine fiery power that he was only now beginning to understand and harness. He envisioned the star, not just as a celestial body, but as a symbol of life, warmth, and the light that guided through darkness. Slowly, Felix began to gather the cosmic dust and gas floating aimlessly around him, using his will to compress them into a dense sphere. The materials coalesced under his command, drawn together by the invisible force of his intent. As the mass grew, so too did the pressure within it, a mounting force seeking release. The heart of the nascent star began to glow faintly, the first spark of life within its core. Felix's eyes shone with reflected light, witnessing the birth of something magnificent from the raw materials of the cosmos. It was like he had the power not to just destroy, but create, add something of real value to the universe's system. Now, he whispered, injecting a surge of Hephaestus' fiery essence into the heart of the sphere. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The core ignited, a brilliant flash of light that pierced the surrounding darkness, marking the birth of a new star. Candace and the rest of the Void citizens watched in awe as the star blazed to life, its light steady and strong. As he floated there, basking in the light of his creation, Felix felt a deep connection to the cosmos, an understanding that he was part of something much greater. The experience was transformative, reshaping his perception of his place in the universe and the path that lay before him. If I ascended 6 more times and obtained the powers to rule over dozens of laws, will my existence be closer to the universe? He muttered in his mind as he watched the source of life burning before him. Will that be enough to bring down the 3 rulers? As Felix asked, expecting no one to answer him, he couldn't help but focus on Lilith. Then, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath before snapping them open with a different type of look. That breath was his pride, his dignity, his face, all for the sake of his loved one. I desire to know how strong are the rulers compared to the Unigens? Felix asked. Oh ho ho ho, what do we have here? Lilith lowered her sunglasses, showing an amusing look. This was the first time Felix went out of his way to query her something directly after what she did to him and his masters. She always answered some of his questions, but only through interjections. Can you just answer? Felix got irritated swiftly. You can't expect me not to enjoy this. Lilith chuckled, the great Felix seeking my help and wisdom. I understood this was a dumb idea. Relax, can't I tease you for a bit? Seeing that Felix's expression was still not amused, Lilith could only sigh and say out loud, fine, you desire to know? I will inform you. Everyone's ears perked up in intrigue while their expression showed an untold amount of seriousness. The 3 rulers' strength and powers were always up to debate compared to the Unigens. It was finally the time where they would put a number on it. Long story short. Lilith shared casually, they can be as strong as their celestial reservoir, growing infinitely more powerful than anything imaginable. Infinitely. Yes, infinitely. 1664 not so innocent. Uncaring about everyone's stunned expressions, Lilith continued, her gaze piercing into the distance. The 3 rulers possess a strength that is not static. Their power has the potential to grow infinitely, bound only by the amount of celestial energy they can access and harness. This is all you should know to understand that those beings are close to untouchable if they decide to go all out. Felix absorbed her words, the implications slowly dawning on him. The cosmic battle for power was not just about the might one started with but the ability to accumulate and expand that might. At this moment, he came to realize that the 3 rulers should never be thought of from the same perspective as Unigens. Any being with the ability to grow infinitely implied that his existence was at the apex. For him to even be named in the same breath as them, he needed to join that apex first. Lilith saw the realization dawn on Felix's face and nodded, affirming his understanding. Yes. Your ascensions, your battles, even the star you've just created, they are all part of a larger tapestry of power. Unfortunately, the rulers have positioned themselves at the nexus of celestial energy, drawing upon it to fuel their endless growth. Even I don't know their current level. I see. Felix nodded, a new determination kindling within him. Understanding the true nature of the ruler's strength didn't make him lose his confidence, but provided him with a new lens through which to view his journey and the challenges ahead. When it came to Isna, he would never get discouraged by anything as he was going to save her no matter what it took. That's a promise he had to keep. Knowing this changes everything. It's not enough to match their current strength, you must find a way to surpass their growth potential. Lady Sphinx commentated calmly. In other words, when it came to the 3 rulers, there was no such thing as surpassing an amount of bloodline force to be able to defeat them. Their strength had already overcome this stage, and for Felix to reach the same platform as them, he had to escape from such limitations as well. Having the ability to ascend multiple times is currently the only available option to achieve this state. Felix shared his thoughts. I believe that if I reached the 7th ascension, the universe might consider putting me in the same breath as the 3 rulers, since my social status would not be on the same level as other Unigens. He believed that the universe might separate him from the rest of the Unigens since his status would be much higher than theirs, knowing that the universe was all about balance. It would be nice if it happens, but one can only hope, Thor replied. Asna, being a celestial herself, might also possess the same infinite growth potential. Elder Kraken suggested, I believe if you found a way to save her and return her core, she will be the true danger to the three rulers as long as she awakens. What's your thoughts on this? Felix glanced at Lilith, wanting to add her into their conversations willingly, to extract information. I would agree. Lilith chuckled, if your little girlfriend were to awaken, she would be the bane of the three rulers and their plan. Before anyone could react to this surprising, but somewhat expected piece of news, she continued, too bad, the celestial energy required for her awakening is on a different level. How bad? If compared to the amount I stole? 1,000 times. Felix narrowed his eyes. Lilith merely pointed a finger upward as a response. 10,000 times. The finger was still up. 100,000 times. I don't have time for this. Lilith's eyelids twitched and replied, it's beyond a century billion. The moment Felix and the tenants heard this, they were left staring at each other in utter stupefaction. They expected her to be an energy-devouring monster, but beyond 100 billion times what he stole? That was simply unimaginable. Why does she need so much? Felix sucked a deep breath. I knew Unigens devour tons of energy to rouse their full strength, but still. If this was what everyone needed to awaken, then, the universe would have not a single awakened Unigen roaming around. Your girlfriend is a special breed. Lilith uttered with a slightly envious tone, she is kind of a mixed creature with attributes of celestials and Unigens. She can harness, absorb, and control celestial energy, but at the same time, she has compatibility with all laws and elements, plus possesses the ability to awaken like Unigens. Mind you, the three rulers can't awaken. When she was put like this, everyone noticed that Asna somewhat neither was a celestial nor a Unigen, she was both and none. None in the sense that she had yet to rouse and establish her genuine powers and capabilities, while at the same time, she had yet to create her own divinity. The celestial white flames were something standardized among the three rulers too. In other words, she had yet to explore an inch of her true strength. Is this why she was sealed? Felix's pupil narrowed in focus after it dawned on him that Asna's presence was a direct hurdle for the three rulers' master plan. It's one of the main reasons. Lilith confirmed it, there is no way the three rulers can allow her to rouse when she is going to exhaust all the resources they had painstakingly collected for eons. As expected. Felix's expression got cold, this means unless the three rulers succeeded in their plan, Asna was bound to be either imprisoned or banished away from celestial energy sources for the rest of her life. Yab. Lilith added oil to the fire with a sinister smile. Also, the majority of the Unigens agreed to her exile when they heard that celestial energy would be dried up from the land for the next eons if she were ever to awaken. Why do you think none of them are sympathetic to her imprisonment even when it happened twice? In their eyes, she is even more risky than the three rulers. The more she spoke, the more Felix's body temperature rose until he felt like he could melt anything nearby, even his eyes started to turn red with liquefied lava gathered near the tips akin to tears. Who, little one, relax, relax. Thor remarked while cleaning the sweat on his forehead. Aww, it burns. Candace yelped in pain and swiftly teleported away. Easy there, Felix. Fenrir used his ice manipulation to cool down the temperature a bit. Oh, my bad. When Felix heard everyone and saw the sudden change in atmosphere, he swiftly regained control over his body temperature. As he lowered it back to normal, his anger was still there, but this time, he didn't let it meddle with his temperature. This was one of the many subtle changes that occurred after his second ascension. I guess they weren't so innocent after all, Felix remarked with a cold tone as he envisioned the *TTY treatment Asna had to go through in her childhood. As a Unigen born 20 million years ago, she was considered the youngest of them all, and instead of guiding her and treating her as their little princess, they banished and locked her up all alone. While Felix knew better not to believe anything Lilith had said, he wasn't dumb enough to believe that the Unigens had their hands off this. Even if they didn't actively participate, the fact that none of them stood up for Asna was enough of an excuse to not feel an ounce of remorse in hunting them down. Give me their names, it will make my decision for my next targets much easier. Felix inquired with a cold tone. Author announcement, my apologies for missing the release date for 3 days now. The situation related to my family's inheritance has developed into a deadlock, and it started to get a bit chaotic down here. In the end, we have decided to rely on lawyers to avoid any unnecessary trouble and solve this amicably. I have returned to the office in the morning and I have used all my time to edit as many chapters as I could. I have edited 5 now and will release them all today. Tomorrow I will edit the last one to finish what you guys owe me for the past 3 days. Thank you for your understanding and I hope you have a great day. 1665 Exploring the True Potential of 7 The Sin's Laws. After Felix received the names of the Unigens, he ignored the ones unreachable by him at his current level and aimed his guns at the familiar ones. Poseidon, Zeus, Athena, Aeolus, Hephaestus, and Demeter. He repeated with a tint of coldness in his voice. Interesting, only Apollo and Artemis have rejected the proposition, Thor remarked. It's not that interesting. Lilith replied lazily, Apollo has slept through the decision while Artemis is a known softie and couldn't put the little one through that. It doesn't matter, let's start with those 5 and if they dared to stop in my path, I wouldn't mind adding them to the list, Felix remarked. You make it sound like you already have the other 5 in the bag. Lord Shiva humbled him with an indifferent tone, do you have a plan in mind to take one of them at least? No, not yet, Felix replied with a deep frown. He wanted to both establish a connection with Asna and take down a Unigen or 2. But both situations required some serious planning and at the moment, he didn't have much. He could see a small line to achieve both missions during the celestial ceremony, but at the same time, he couldn't pull it. In the end, he placed the planning in the back of his mind and focused on improving his strength and foundation first. Without the necessary strength, even if he had the plan ready, he wouldn't have what it took to pull it off. Now, that he had somehow gotten closer with Lilith during their last conversation, he had less of a struggle to request her assistance in mastering the true potential of his sin's laws. Lilith merely showed a faint smirk, like she had expected him to cave in eventually. Although she knew that his vengeful thoughts towards her hadn't changed, she wasn't too bothered by it. Come down here, she said. Upon entering Asna's core, Felix noticed Lilith sitting on the floor. Her robe was slightly raised, revealing some of her inner thighs. Felix walked forward and sat across from each other. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, as Lilith prepared to delve into the depths of the sin's laws. Felix, Lilith began, her voice low and imbued with a gravity that demanded attention. Unlike her usual playfulness, you have only begun to scratch the surface of the sin's law's true potential. These laws are not just tools for battle, they are a reflection of the deepest, most primal aspects of existence itself. Lilith leaned forward, ensuring Felix grasped the significance of her words. The true terror of the sin's laws lies in their ability to manipulate and control the very essence of desire. Felix and the tenants couldn't help but nod their heads in agreement with solemn looks. The notion of the 7 sins laws being restricted by some symbol's effects didn't sit well with them. In their minds, the ruler of the 7 sins should rule anyone and anything with a tint of desire in their system. For example, the 3 rulers weren't pure desireless beings, they sought their freedom and would do anything to make it happen. That alone should speak volumes of their intense emotions related to this issue and how Felix should have the possibility to manipulate it to his advantage. However, he had gone through all the unlocked symbols after he ascended, and there was nothing there that was powerful enough to work on them. Lilith's gaze held Felix's, ensuring he comprehended the weight of her next words. You have ascended into the paragon of sins, but in reality, you became a mere starter Unigen with basic understanding and access to your powers. You think the 25 million BF, some inner enhancement, and those unlocked symbols are everything. Not even close. Unigens are just like any other being with powers, the universe bestows the tools and we are left to use them within its allowed confinement. Lilith remarked calmly, we also invent, learn, master, fail, and sometimes succeed in utilizing our laws. In your case, You haven't inherited anything I have achieved in my peak, you merely inherited the standardized basics of my laws, and the same must have happened during your second ascension. She chuckled, you might have created a star, but try to condense 1,000 of them at once and see what happens. In other words, even if he had defeated Hephaestus and obtained his powers, there was no way he was going to show the same level of prowess as Hephaestus in terms of utilizing the fire laws. He would battle to even condense a couple of stars without having them explode in his face on the first attempt. I have always assumed this. Being a Unigine means having the freedom to control the laws as you please, and I have yet to experience this with my laws. Felix nodded in understanding. It's good I have a confirmation at last. If you are implying the freedom to manipulate sins just like void energy, fire, or such, then you will be gravely disappointed. Lilith shook her head. 7 sins are bound by symbols and that's their limitation imposed on them by the universe. You cannot manipulate the desires of beings in your realm or above directly without symbols, just like Eris' limitation is the order and chaos tome. Before Felix could feel disappointed to hear this, Lilith continued, however, you have the potential to create new sin symbols, each embodying an aspect effect of sin not yet explored. New symbols? How? Felix leaned forward, intrigued. The concept of crafting a new sin symbol was both daunting and electrifying. It's a feat that requires a profound understanding of desire and its manifestations. To create a new symbol, you must first conceptualize a sin that embodies a unique aspect of desire. It's not about replicating what already exists but discovering new depths to the sins that govern our actions. You can even capitalize on your desires to create symbols. She paused, making sure that Felix comprehended the seriousness of her words before continuing. Let's consider an example, a symbol I have long since created called the reflective mirror symbol. This symbol draws upon my desire to turn one's enemies' strengths against them, a reflection of my envy, yet distinct in its application. Felix absorbed her explanation, the gears turning in his mind as he envisioned the symbol's potential. The reflective mirror symbol, Lilith elaborated, creates a mirror that does more than merely reflect. It captures any ability directed towards it and reflects a copy. It can even create a copy for the user's utilization. For real. That's too good. Any ability. Can he copy abilities related to Eris and other upper celestial Unigines? This symbol alone was enough to blow everyone's minds off. All of them comprehended the significance of being able to copy other Unigines' abilities. While they knew some conditions must be fulfilled for the symbol to work, having a possibility was better than none. So, the process of creation involves not just the power, but the intent, the desire behind the symbol. Exactly, Lilith affirmed. It's about embodying a concept so deeply that it materializes into a symbol. You must ponder on the essence of the new sin, focusing your desires and energies until they coalesce into a symbol. She leaned back, giving Felix a moment to digest the information. This can be simple and difficult depending on your intelligence since it requires introspection and a deep dive into the nature of sin and desire. But with your unique journey and experiences, you are in a prime position to explore this path. Felix sat in contemplation. The idea of creating new symbols sparked a myriad of possibilities. However, he comprehended that this couldn't be all. Creating new symbols was great and all, but Lilith couldn't have antagonized the entire kingdom with just some new symbols. There must be something else, something more terrifying. You must be wondering if there is anything else. Lilith chuckled after reading him like a book. Felix gave a head nod with a solemn expression. Well, is there? How about this? If you manage to create a new symbol in the next year, I will tell you what's next. Lilith smiled as she offered him a challenge. Fine by me. Felix agreed to it without much complaint. He stood up and turned around, planning to take a hike. He already had plans to focus wholeheartedly on finding out more about those new symbols, plus exploring his new heat-related laws. A year was enough time to work on them. Alas, if only Lilith wasn't too much of a playful succubus. By the way, you aren't allowed to create symbols I have already invented. She giggled as she eyed Felix's shoulders tense from the back after he heard her ludicrous statement. Slowly and deliberately, Felix turned his head until his twitching face was in front of Lilith's. Then, he asked with a forced smile, "You joking, right?" Nope. 1666 Exploring the True Potential of 7 The Sin's Laws. 2. A couple of days later, inside a castle made out of the World Eater's symbiotic skin, Felix could be seen sitting on the floor of his throne chamber. He had his eyes closed, delving deep into the concept of greed, contemplating its multifaceted nature. He recognized greed as a force that drove beings to amass power, wealth, and resources beyond their needs, often at the expense of others. Yet, he also considered greed's potential to inspire ambition, motivation, and the pursuit of excellence. The duality of greed, Felix murmured, it's a source of destruction, yet also a catalyst for growth and achievement. This dichotomy, the destructive and constructive faces of greed, became the foundation of his meditations in the past days. Hours passed as Felix remained in deep contemplation, his mind weaving through the intricate tapestry of desire that greed represented. Slowly, an idea began to crystallize, an insight into how greed could be harnessed in a new, controlled manner. I'll call it the avarice amplifier symbol, Felix decided, his voice echoing softly in the throne chamber. The symbol he envisioned would embody the dual nature of greed, enhancing the user's abilities by amplifying their desire for power. However, this amplification would come with a caveat: it would require the user to consciously balance their ambition with the risk of being consumed by their greed. In a sense, it was a perfect symbol, with the right limitations to allow the universe to permit its existence. After all, without the universe's approval, new symbols couldn't be added. The symbol won't only boost my strength, speed, or capabilities in proportion to my greed but also test my ability to manage the intensified desires it invoked, Felix remarked. In other words, the greater the user's ambition, the more significant the enhancement, but succumbing to greed's destructive aspect could lead to a loss of control, making the symbol a double-edged sword. With the concept fully formed in his mind, Felix began the intricate process of manifesting the symbol. He was already taught the process by Lilith. He extended his hands, focusing his energy and intent on the space before him. Slowly, a glowing greed fox sigil began to take shape, its lines and curves swirling into existence, embodying the essence of greed's potential and peril. As the avarice amplifier symbol solidified, Felix felt a surge of satisfaction. He had not only created a new sin symbol but also encapsulated a fundamental truth of existence within it, the balance between ambition and restraint, the fine line between achieving greatness and falling into ruin. You did it! Thor raised an eyebrow in surprise. Wasn't it a bit too easy? It was never hard in the first place. Lady Sphinx replied calmly, all he needs is a logical concept that utilizes his laws and the universe's approval. With those two conditions, a new symbol would come to life. Ignore him, he is just used to how difficult it was for us to create every single damn ability. Ramongandra chuckled with a bitter look. The difference was indeed a bit too much, but it was understandable. Unigens operated in a different field than primogenitors when it came to manipulation. How could the owners of laws be taught anything or struggle to learn or master something? As long as the conditions were fulfilled for the creation of their abilities, they would come to life. Nothing more, nothing less. Good symbol. Unfortunately, I have already invented a replica, which I call, insatiable infusion symbol, Lilith called out lazily. Tisk. Felix clicked his tongue in annoyance. He already anticipated that Lilith would have created the same symbol since it wasn't really that complex or unique. Still, he dreaded the thought of her creating every possible and known symbol in existence, making it an impossible mission to invent something new. Ka-thum. Suddenly, with a wide smile, Nimmo kicked open the door to the throne chamber. Daddy! I want play! Little god, you can't disturb the Lord's work. The ruiner came chasing after Nemo with an exhausted expression like he would rather deal with an army of 10,000 royal dragons than handle Nemo. "It's all right, ruiner," Felix said with a faint smile as he caught Nemo in his embrace. "My apologies, my lord, I have tried my best to teach him combat, but he refuses to stay still in one place." The ruiner sighed, "You already know we can't force him or resist his commands. Why were you making trouble?" Felix gave Nemo a scolding look. Felix had assigned the ruiner to teach Nemo early after he realized that he was growing a bit too fast and was losing control over his strength. Just yesterday, he beat up 2 void citizens to a pulp after they were assigned as play dates. Yet, because Nemo was considered born out of his soul, he also possessed godlike domination over the void citizens, which he abused to get out of his classes. "I won't play with you," Nemo said with a sorrowful soft voice. "Is that so?" Felix's tone softened a bit. If he wasn't in the process of recovering his soul to its peak, he would have created a clone and used it to spend some quality time with Nemo while he was working on other matters. But, he couldn't do this for quite a while, and Felix didn't want to shut himself from Nemo, knowing that no one could handle him but him. "I can do both." "All right, let's play," Felix ordered. "Ruiner, you may leave." The ruiner bowed his head and took off swiftly like he was scared Felix would change his mind. "Nemo, ready yourself," Felix instructed as he threw Nemo away from him, his voice firm yet encouraging. Nemo did a backflip and landed on the ground, resembling a miniature version of Felix with his curious eyes and determined stance. "Ready, Daddy?" He nodded vigorously, his tiny fists raised in readiness. Whoosh! Whoosh! As they began to move, Felix's movements were deliberate, each strike and maneuver designed to test Nemo's reflexes and adaptability. Nemo, for his part, was eager, trying to mimic Felix's techniques with varying degrees of success, his youthful exuberance making up for his lack of finesse. Still, between the exchanges, Felix's mind wandered to the new symbol he had created. Thud. Boom. Thud. Right now, each block and counter he executed was mirrored by thoughts on how the symbol's power could be both an incredible asset and a formidable challenge to its wielder. Felix decided to use it as a learning lesson for Nemo as he wanted to shape his personality the opposite of Lilith's. "Nemo, greed can drive us to surpass our limits," Felix mused aloud, "but unchecked, it can also lead us to our downfall." Nemo, panting slightly from the effort, paused to consider Felix's words. "Like fighting?" he asked, tilting his head in confusion. "You know when push and when hold back." Felix smiled, impressed by Nemo's quick grasp of the concept. "Exactly," he replied, launching a gentle offensive that Nemo managed to dodge with surprising agility. "In combat and inside wielding the sins, balance is key. You must always be aware of your desires, channeling them to empower you without letting them take control." As the spar continued, Felix subtly incorporated a varying intensity of his attacks to simulate Nemo's growth. He found out before that Nemo was capable of utilizing both the 7 sins laws plus void laws as long as he was taught how. In this spar, Felix tried his best to teach him the new symbol he had created, by either incorporating the concept or utilizing it in front of him. Nemo, absorbing every lesson, started to understand not merely the physical aspects of combat but too the deeper implications of wielding power responsibly. After multiple attempts, even when he was extremely young plus barely capable of proper speech, Nemo managed to learn the avarice amplifier symbol and use it inside combat. 1667 Exploring the true potential of 7 the sins laws. 3. That's the one. Felix praised as he watched a fox-like green aura surrounding Nemo while the symbol itself was manifested above his head. "Show me what you got." Whoosh! Whoosh! As they commenced their spar, Felix could sense a change in Nemo. The boy's usual calculated approach was replaced by a more aggressive and reckless style. With each successful block and counter, Nemo's confidence surged, fueled by the symbol's power. His eyes, a vivid shade of green, betrayed the influence of the avarice amplifier symbol, its power enhancing his physical capabilities in real time, reflecting his growing desire for strength and victory. Nemo's attacks became faster, stronger, and more unpredictable. The air around him seemed to crackle with raw energy, each strike carrying the weight of his burgeoning greed for power. Interesting, the enhancement was extraordinary, but the influence on the mind is too much. Felix, observing the transformation, recognized the signs of the symbol's darker influence. Nemo's technique was devolving into something wild, uncontrolled, and barbaric, far removed from the disciplined approach he had been taught. Food. Felix parried another wildly thrown punch, stepping back to gauge Nemo's condition. "Nemo, focus!" he called out, attempting to break through the haze of greed clouding his judgment. "Fall Victali!" But Nemo seemed lost to the symbol's allure, his attacks growing more frenzied with each passing moment, even his speech was hindered greatly. With a swift motion, Felix disengaged, putting some distance between them. "Nemo, stop!" he commanded, his voice imbued with enough force to momentarily break through Nemo's frenzied state. "Look at yourself. This isn't what I have just taught you." Nemo paused, his breathing heavy, as the green in his eyes began to fade. The realization of his loss of control dawned on him, the wildness in his gaze giving way to confusion and then to shame. He looked down at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time, the symbol's glow dimming with his waning aggression. "Sorry, Daddy. Sorry." The notion of disappointing his father brought tears to his eyes. Felix wiped his tears and said with a gentle tone, "The avarice amplifier symbol is a powerful tool, but it demands respect and restraint. Greed, unchecked, can lead to ruin. Today, you learned that power must be wielded with wisdom, not just desire. This applies to everything." Nemo nodded, the lesson etched deeply in his mind. I didn't realize. Sorry." Felix smiled faintly, recognizing the value in the lesson learned. "It's all right, this is part of your journey. Understanding your desires and learning to master them is as important as any physical training." For Felix, this was a reminder of his responsibility as a mentor and a father, guiding Nemo not just towards physical prowess but towards becoming a balanced and wise wielder of the sin's laws. He acknowledged that the 7 sins laws were capable of ruining someone's personality, leading him down a horrible path if misused. He was an adult when he ascended and still found it difficult to control his desires sometimes, don't even mention a child with a blank slate. Thus, Felix didn't hold back in his teachings. Some time later. "You did well today, Nemo," Felix said, pride evident in his voice. "Daddy most powerful." Nemo beamed, his respect for his father deepening after each spar. "I still have to get much stronger to save your mother," Felix said as he touched him on the head, "so, go spend some time with Candace until I am done with work. I help Daddy save Mommy," Nemo proclaimed with his fangs protruding in anger. "You already helped me enough today." Felix meant every word as he had managed to deepen his understanding of the creation of new symbols through their spar. After some other reassuring words, Nemo took off with a wide smile and a glimmer of excitement in his eyes, seeking to show Candace and the rest what he learned. "Phew, children sure are a handful." Felix chuckled to himself as he returned to his seated position. Avarice amplifier seemed to have enhanced Nemo's strength by 20% or even 30% before he started losing control. Lady Sphinx analyzed, "You might receive a much bigger enhancement. Let's test it out." As Felix activated the symbol, a vibrant, fox-like aura enveloped him, its ethereal tails swirling around his form like flames. He could feel the surge of strength coursing through his veins, each muscle fiber tensing with newfound vigor. His senses sharpened, the world around him coming into focus with unprecedented clarity. The power was intoxicating, seductive in its intensity. Plus 10%, plus 20%, plus 30%, plus 40%, plus 50%. With every passing second, Felix felt the boost in his strength, agility, and elemental prowess climbing, reaching a staggering plus 50% all rounded enhancement. But with this ascension came a barrage of greedy thoughts, whispering promises of endless power and urging him to seek more, always more. Why stop here? Imagine what you could achieve with even greater strength. You could reshape the world, bend it to your will. No one could stand against you. Those thoughts assaulted him non-stop, causing Felix to struggle to maintain his focus, the symbol's influence tugging at the edges of his mind, tempting him to succumb to the greed that powered it. He could feel the fox-like aura pulsing, its glow intensifying with his growing desires. Gritting his teeth, Felix fought against the tide of greed, reminding himself of the symbol's true cost. He knew that yielding to these desires would only lead to his downfall, ensnaring him in a cycle of insatiable hunger for power that could never be satisfied. Enough is enough. With a Herculean effort, Felix reined in the greedy thoughts, the fox-like aura beginning to dissipate as he regained control. Huff huff. Breathing heavily, he took a moment to reflect on the experience. It's indeed a potent symbol, but wielding it required an unimaginable level of discipline and mental fortitude. Felix commented while wiping his sweaty forehead. It seems like 40% to 50% is your current limitation. Lady Sphinx remarked. If utilized with his other enhancement symbols, like I Am Supreme, Rampage, and such, the boost will be much deadlier, Thor added. I doubt it. Felix shook his head. Don't forget that my other enhancing symbols require conditions and have their limitations. I can't defend I Am Supreme symbol if I am fighting against my thoughts, and the Rampage symbol already messes with my mind a bit through rage. I can't add greed too in a critical battle that requires complete concentration. In other words, Felix acknowledged that if he went and decided to stack up all the enhancement symbols at once, the side effects would also stack up and might ruin his battle. If only there was a way to combine the symbols into a much more potent symbol to limit the drawbacks, Felix murmured. Upon saying this, his gaze quickly shifted towards Lilith. He observed a faint smile on her lips, which she quickly concealed. Is this the next level you were talking about? Felix asked with an eager look. He had already tried to combine and merge symbols before through willing it, but the symbols refused to budge. He gave up on the thought, believing that it might be impossible. But now? Knowing that Lilith verified there was a next level of Sin's manipulation, he had to revisit this idea. Alas, Lilith merely shrugged her shoulders as a response, beats me. Felix's eyelids twitched. He understood that Lilith had no intentions of helping him explore the next level of manipulation unless he succeeded in the challenge. At least, he was now confident that merging symbols was a viable option. Let's continue with the creation of the symbols. Felix held his chin thoughtfully. What's next? Should I try to merge the heat-based sins with a sin? I might be able to create a whole new symbol. 1668 Exploring the true potential of 7 The Sin's laws. 4. Felix discerned that the only way for him to create a new symbol was to think out of the box and utilize assets that Lilith had no access to. Otherwise, even if he spent the next million years developing one symbol after another, he would never be able to invent something new. Lilith had billions of years to develop symbols while he had only a decade. It wasn't happening. Since Hephaestus's core was merged with the wrathful Hydra dragon head, then I believe there must be a path to merge those laws in a symbol. Lady Sphinx supported Felix's theory. They are quite compatible with each other. Elder Kraken nodded. Felix also recognized the compatibility between those laws and decided to start simple and explore them. Fire essence. Felix's focus was absolute as he called forth the essence of fire, feeling the scorching blue flames swirl around him, a dance of potential destruction waiting for direction. Then, he invoked a wrath symbol dubbed Dragon's Fury, causing a manifestation of a massive crimson dragon to emerge above him. This dragon was utilized as an offensive attack instead of boosting Felix's strength. Felix wanted to use it multiple times in his previous battles, but there were always better options. Are you planning to merge the dragon with fire essence? Thor inquired. Yes. Felix extended his hands, palms up, as the ethereal blue fire danced between his fingers, casting a surreal glow over his determined features. Fuse. With a whispered incantation, Felix released the essence towards the dragon. The air around them tensed, charged with anticipation, as the blue flames met the dragon's crimson form. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the world holding its breath as the fusion commenced. The transformation was instantaneous and awe-inspiring. The dragon's scales took on a new luster, a vibrant display of reds and blues mingling to invent a spectacle of living flame. Roar! With a mighty roar, the creature unleashed a torrent of fire from its maw, a blaze that illuminated the darkness of space. Yet, as the flames died down, a look of dissatisfaction crossed Felix's face. The dragon, for all its newfound power and the spectacle of its fire, did not meet his expectations. It was a creature of flame, yes, capable of spewing fire that could melt stone and scorch the earth, but to Felix, it lacked more. It was merely a beast of fire, not the embodiment of the elemental fury and profound depth he had envisioned. I wanted more than just fire, Felix murmured to himself, his voice barely audible over the crackling of residual flames. I seek a dragon capable of feeding off both wrath and fire in tandem, allowing it to transcend its original form. This is just a dragon with fire. Then, you have to create a new symbol from scratch with those two laws as its foundation. Lady Sphinx suggested. It's the only way I see forward. Felix nodded in agreement. While the dragon and his fire were merged, it was on a surface level, like 1 + 1 = 2, what Felix desired and aimed to achieve was more than that. How do I achieve it though? Should I use the same conceptualization process? Felix tapped his finger on his chin thoughtfully. At the moment, he could only rely on the same method he used to create his new symbol. He dove into the depths of his mind and began pondering on the essence of wrath and fire, feeling their fiery pulse within the core of his being. Wrath is more than just anger, it is a forceful call to action, a powerful response to injustice and injury that demands release. Meanwhile, fire has a dual nature of creation and destruction. It is the reflection of life itself, capable of nurturing warmth and devastating conflagration. It is uncontrollable, wild, and a symbol of passion and change. The merging of Wrathson and Fire Law into a single concept is predicated on their shared attributes of power, transformation, and unrestrained energy. Felix continued brainstorming. Both concepts deal with the idea of an uncontrollable force that, once unleashed, follows its nature toward a climactic release. Wrath, with its focus on emotional energy and desire for action, aligns perfectly with fire's capacity for physical transformation and its role as a catalyst for change. The more Felix familiarized himself with the commonalities between the two laws, the easier it became for him to visualize a concept that would encompass them both. As he kept diving into his thoughts, Felix managed to come up with a logical concept amidst the sea of theories. It wasn't related to dragons or such, but at the moment, he only wanted to invent a new symbol, regardless of its effect. What if there was a symbol that's capable of receiving amplification of emotional energy, where my anger would feed the flames, granting them strength beyond measure? Thus, the angrier I get, the more potent the flames become, embodying the idea that wrath, when directed, can serve as a powerful motivator and weapon. Felix reasoned. He soon shared his thoughts with the tenants and all of them seemed to agree with his take. Anger used to amplify fire-based attacks, interesting. Ancestral Dragon Immer remarked, it's more or less close to our innate ability of which we turn our anger into strength. But, this will be exclusively focused on heat-based laws. It's even better, I can make the symbol simultaneously transform the heat resulting from my anger to feed into it. Felix added, this will provide me with an incessant supply of rage. You mean like an infinite cycle of anger/heat reproduction? Thor raised an eyebrow in surprise. If this works, then you will be provided with incessant fuel to empower your heat-based attacks. Let's see if the universe approves of the concept. With a determined breath, Felix reached out to the wrath and fire energies that danced at the edge of his consciousness. Then, he visualized a wrath-based empty symbol. It had only borders and the dragon in the middle. The inscriptions weren't there yet. Next, he started feeding both energies into the symbol while simultaneously using the concept in his mind to guide the universe into the symbol creation. It was like he was telling the universe what he wanted from the symbol, its powers, its drawbacks, its duration, etc. The universe was the cook, using the provided ingredients to see if it was possible for a decent dish to emerge or not. With held breath, Felix waited for the universe's judgment. After a split second that seemed like an eternity, the universe responded at last. With a beam of light that only Felix could see, inscriptions began to manifest near the borders of the symbol and spread out until they touched the central crimson dragon. It worked. Felix shared with a pleased smile as he brought the sigil to life before everyone. Wow, it's quite different. The tenants had looks of surprise as they gazed at the new symbol. The crimson dragon was now wearing a scruff of flames while half of the inscriptions were written with liquid fire. It also glowed with intense heat, which created heat waves around it, causing the dragon to seem alive from a distance. It was like the universe had recognized the uniqueness of the symbol and gave it the appropriate appearance. Weird, the universe hasn't clapped like always. Candace murmured as she glanced above her head. When she brought up this matter, everyone realized that a thunderclap was the usual whenever Felix did something for the first time with massive implications. Merging two separated rules into one symbol warranted a reaction in their eyes. Unless... Everyone swiftly turned to gaze at Lilith with stunned expressions. Have you already created a symbol by merging void rules with sin laws? Felix asked what was in everyone's minds. Maybe? I don't recall. Lilith replied lazily while stretching her beautiful legs before them. A leg massage might help me recollect. 1669 Exploring the true potential of 7 The Sin's Laws. V. Felix and the others ignored her teasing and engaged in a discussion, knowing that her reaction was enough of an agreement. I thought only Felix could merge laws for symbols since his wrathful Hydra tail possessed both laws. Candace wondered. Following your reasoning, this also gives Lilith and Felix the ability to combine void laws with sin laws since they own both of them. Lady Sphinx said, Hydra tails made it somewhat easier for the merge to happen, I give you that. Felix and the rest nodded in understanding. In their eyes, it would be illogical for him to possess the merging capabilities, but not Lilith, even though she also commanded 2 separate laws. What can void law get us if merged with sin's laws? Ramongandra asked. Everyone dove deeper into their thoughts, seeking to find some sort of compatibility between the laws to invent a reasonable concept. After a few moments, Fenrir was the first to propose. Maybe something like combining gluttony's excessive consumption with the void's ability to swallow everything into nothingness? It could manifest as a maw that devours all in its path, never satisfied, reflecting gluttony's endless appetite and the void's capacity to contain infinitely. It was like instead of creating an ability that could either absorb or disintegrate, he would combine both aspects into a symbol that could devour all matter and disintegrate it. Sounds reasonable enough. Felix asked, should I give it a try? Why not? Now that Felix had succeeded in combining fire law with wrath law, he felt more comfortable with the thought of messing around with other variations. Plus, it wasn't like he had anything to lose. If the universe didn't approve of the symbol's existence, he would not get punished or harmed. With a deep, focused breath, Felix closed his eyes, his mind reaching out to the elemental energies and sin laws he intended to weave together. He envisioned the essence of gluttony, as not merely the desire for excessive consumption but a deeper, more primal hunger that could never be satisfied, always seeking, always wanting more. Then, he summoned the concept of the void, an endless expanse of nothingness capable of swallowing worlds, leaving behind a silence as profound as it was absolute. In the space of his mind, Felix brought these two forces together, imagining a symbol that could embody both the relentless hunger of gluttony and the erasing power of the void. He saw a maw, vast and insatiable, a gateway to oblivion where all things, once consumed, ceased to exist, their essence absorbed into the endless emptiness. As the concept of gluttony's maw took shape in his mind, Felix reached out with his will, offering this new fusion of laws to the universe for approval. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, a submission to the cosmos's judgment, acknowledging that for all his power, he was but a part of a greater whole. The universe responded. A symbol materialized before him, complex and ever-shifting, its lines and curves inscribing the laws of gluttony and void into existence. The symbol glowed with a hungry light, its presence both a promise and a warning. Here was a power that could consume worlds but at the risk of being consumed by the very hunger it wielded. Felix opened his eyes, gazing upon gluttony's maw with a mixture of awe and satisfaction. "This is fun, I can do this all day," he commentated with a wide grin. He felt like he was playing a game instead of training. If there was one thing he hated the most about his elemental manipulations was the amount of repetitive training he had to do for the sake of learning a single ability. It was too much hard work for something Unigens and the Celestials could achieve with a mere snap of a finger. It wasn't fair in the slightest. Now, he was enjoying the process of training as all he needed to do was brainstorm a reasonable concept and let the universe take the wheel, allowing him more time to train on utilizing the symbols and assimilate them into his fighting style. "Not bad, what will you call them?" Lilith asked with a faint smile. "Let's keep it simple, Gluttony's Maw and Infernal Wrath," Felix decided. "I thought you would call them all Devouring Pig and In Heat symbols, looks like your naming sense has improved a bit." Thor chuckled with the others. "My naming sense wasn't that bad." Felix's eyelids twitched. "You are reaching." "Are we though?" Candace giggled while covering her mouth. "Try to recall." Felix was forced to revisit those memories and realize that without Asna to set him straight, he would have ruined Nemo's life and many others with the worst names known in existence. Cough, anyways, I think it's time to try those symbols. Felix swiftly dipped from the conversation in his throne chamber, emerging above the World Eater's massive head. "Let's start with Infernal Wrath." With a deep breath, Felix extended his hand, palm facing the nothingness, as he summoned the nascent symbol into existence. The air around him shimmered with heat, a prelude to the fusion of elemental fury and emotional tempest that was about to be unleashed. As the symbol appeared, Felix felt a connection to the forces it represented. It was a blend of his wrath and the boundless energy of fire, intertwining in a complex pattern, glowing with intense crimson light. "I have to get angry first." Activating the Inferno Wrath symbol required not just a mere thought, but an invocation of his deepest reserves of anger and determination. Felix focused on the injustices he had faced, the battles fought, and the challenges overcome. With each memory, the symbol pulsed brighter, its energy sinking with the rising tide of his emotions. As the fusion of wrath and fire took hold, Felix's body became the epicenter of a palpable surge of power. The symbol's effect was immediate and electrifying. His veins thrummed with enhanced strength, his senses heightened to an unparalleled degree. Then, with a force of will that bordered on the primal, he channeled this burgeoning power into the creation of a star core. The process, typically slow and demanding, was accelerated under the influence of the Inferno Wrath symbol. Above his outstretched hand, particles of energy began to coalesce, drawing together with a speed and intensity that Felix had never before achieved. The space crackled and sparked as the emerging star core took shape, a radiant orb of pulsing energy that bathed the vacuum of space in a harsh, unnatural light. "I can feel it, its intensity is nowhere the same as the last one," Felix remarked as he was having difficulty maintaining the core's stability. It was difficult to control as it fed off his anger, growing more powerful without him doing anything. This was not just any star core, it was a concentrated nexus of raw cosmic power, a miniature sun that could fuel life or bring about devastation. It was no toy. Since Felix was still a rookie in utilizing Hephaestus laws and had no one to teach him the proper ways to deal with such primal force, he realized that it would blow in his face if he didn't cancel it. While it wouldn't do anything to him, the same couldn't be said about his people. Yet, Felix had no intentions of canceling it. He showed an excited grin as he pulled back his hand and released a punch, his fist connecting with the star core with accuracy and force that belied the vacuum's quiet. The impact sent aftershocks rippling through the void, a display of power that bent the very fabric of existence around it. The star core, subjected to Felix's might, was hurled into the distance, trailing a comet's tail of energy. It tumbled end over end, a captive to the momentum of Felix's strike, moving further and further away into the dark expanse. Then, the star's core exploded, creating a supernova with the intensity of 10 stars combined. Brilliant light flooded space, casting shadows where light had never before existed. "How do you feel?" Lady Sphinx asked as she watched the supernova continue expanding rapidly. "Cold and hot, constantly," Felix replied with a deep frown. He could sense his temperature rising and falling rapidly after his initial anger was consumed to fuel the star's creation. It was like the symbol was forcefully trying to create more fuel by using Felix's body temperature to transfer it into usable anger. The feeling wasn't pleasant in the slightest since his own emotions and body temperature were being messed up unnaturally. This made Felix realize that he might have messed up big time. "The devil is in the details." Lilith chuckled. 1670 Exploring the True Potential of 7 The Sin's Laws. 6. The moment Felix heard her comment, he cancelled the symbol. His emotions and body temperature returned to normal again. "You mean to tell me that bad quality symbols can be created? Symbols that affect the user negatively more than positively?" Felix frowned. "Just because you have a reasonable concept and the universe has approved it, it doesn't mean that the symbol will be great," Lilith remarked lazily. "You have to focus on the details the most since the universe follows the symbol's creation based on what you provided it down to the letter." "I see." Felix assumed that the universe would iron out the rest of the concept during the symbol's creation, but he couldn't be more wrong. The universe is like a programming software that requires as much data as possible to create the desired symbol without too many drawbacks. Lady Sphinx said. "Indeed." Felix nodded. "The infernal wrath symbol doesn't care about how it achieves the infinite reproduction of heat/anger, and this caused me great discomfort. I should have been more precise in how I wanted it to occur, when it should stop, its intensity, and the list goes on. Is it possible to modify it, or you must create a new one from scratch?" Thor wondered. Everyone turned to Lilith. "You can't modify it." Lilith replied casually, "To create a new one, you must erase the old one first." When Felix heard this, he closed his eyes and willed for the infernal wrath symbol to be removed from his arsenal. The symbol soon disintegrated into particles and disappeared from his mind. Then, he started a new creation process, and this time he made sure to add as many details as possible to ensure a much greater quality. In a few moments, a new similar but more dignified symbol manifested before Felix. Everyone could recognize the difference instantly, as the new symbol had more inscriptions written on it until they seemed clamped up. Then, he tested it out again, and this time Felix felt like he could control the intensity of the transfer between heat and anger. This was such a massive quality of life change, that he no longer felt uncomfortable and could focus more on utilizing the newly created fuel in his heat-based attacks. "This is much better than before," Felix said with a satisfied tone. "I should test Gluttony's Maw too and see what's lacking in it." Felix went and tested the symbol. He soon realized that it had its faults too that could be solved. He erased it and created a new improved one. This kind of modification was possible only for small details, not major drawbacks, such as the penalties in Clash of Pride, "I am supreme," etc. Unfortunately, those penalties were one of Felix's current hurdles in his growth, as he knew that no matter how great a symbol was, it would be near impossible to use a dozen of them at the same time without suffering from their side effects. This was one of the many reasons he could not utilize many other symbols during his battles. Thus, he understood that his current priority wasn't even to create new symbols, but to find a way to either get rid of the penalties or at least reduce their intensity. Fortunately, there was a method. I have succeeded in creating a new symbol that you couldn't have invented, Felix said calmly as he showed a small manifestation of the infernal wrath symbol before Lilith. So? What's next? So hasty. Lilith yawned in annoyance as she lay near the pool akin to a dead fish. Can't we leave it for tomorrow or something? Felix remained staring at her with an unfazed expression, making her comprehend that he wanted to know now. Fie, get down here. She permitted as she rolled her eyes in vexation. Felix sent his consciousness to Asna's core and went straight to sit in front of Lilith, who was already awaiting him with an annoyed look. Don't bother me again after this, Lilith warned. Fine by me, Felix replied with a tint of eagerness in his voice. Above symbols is something I call symbolic techniques. Combining symbols into a singular, more potent form is the essence of creating symbolic techniques, she began, her eyes gleaming with the wisdom of eons. It's not merely about stacking effects, it's an art. You must weave them together, ensuring harmony among the symbols to amplify their strengths and mitigate their weaknesses. Symbolic techniques, this is it. This is the good stuff. Felix listened intently, his mind racing with possibilities. The idea of merging symbols to create techniques of unparalleled power was tantalizing, promising a new horizon in his mastery over the sins and laws he had come to command. He understood that if it was possible to combine 7 symbols from 7 different sins and even add other laws into the mix, a monstrosity of ability would be brought to life. This was the true power of the 7 sins, and only now could Felix see a way for Lilith to rival Eris and other upper celestial unigens. To illustrate, Lilith continued, conjuring a spiritual projection between them to aid the explanation. Consider the Veil of Pride technique. It's a masterful blend of the indomitable will symbol and hunger symbol. On their own, each symbol has its strengths and vulnerabilities. The projection morphed, showing 2 symbols spiraling toward each other, their lines and curves dancing in a predestined embrace. When merged, she said, watching Felix's reaction, they create a technique that not only protects the user with a cloak of self-esteem but also feeds on the user's achievements. This cloak becomes stronger with every accomplishment, turning the user's very successes into a bastion against attacks. Felix watched, fascinated as the symbols combined into a single, intricate symbol that radiated a harmonious energy. Now, the colors of orange and gold had blended, a unique beast was formed by merging the body of a boar with the head, mane, and tail of a lion. At first glance, anyone can discern that this was the upgrade as it was bigger and had a dissimilar atmosphere compared to regular symbols. But how do you control the drawbacks? Those 2 merged symbols might not have strong drawbacks like some other symbols, but still. Felix asked with a focused look. He knew that the indomitable will symbol had the drawback of not being able to be utilized for a long period if it was summoned, and the user's prideful belief in his invincibility was lacking. As for hunger symbol, the energy absorption offered a temporary increase in power that needed to be constantly fueled with energy to maintain it. So, it was impossible to get stronger through it unless he was constantly on the move. While those drawbacks were harmless compared to other severe penalties, they were still annoying to deal with. That's where the beauty of symbolic techniques lies, Lilith explained with a faint smile. By combining these symbols, you create a balance. The insatiable hunger of gluttony is tempered by the achievements that fuel pride's protection. Meanwhile, the potential arrogance of pride is grounded by the tangible necessity to achieve more, to feed the gluttonous aspect. The technique turns potential vices into a source of strength, with each aspect keeping the other in check. In essence, Lilith concluded, you're not merely stacking powers. You're weaving them together into a coherent, self-sustaining cycle. The key is balance, understanding how the sins interact, complement, and regulate each other. It makes sense now. Felix and the rest of the tenants were left with raised eyebrows in astonishment at the masterful method Lilith came up with to get rid of the drawbacks. It might seem simple, but it was anything but that. They understood that to find out such an intricate balance between those symbols required an intense level of understanding and insight about the aspects of sins and desires. That's why Lilith said that understanding said desires was the key to becoming the paragon of sins, not by ascension, but by achievements. If you commenced on this, your path to greatness will be hindered only by your intelligence and level of understanding. Lilith excused him with a wave. Now, beat it. 1671 A win-win situation. Not planning to overstay his welcome, Felix gave her a head nod in gratitude and took off. He might hate her guts and want her dead at the first opportunity, but it wouldn't stop him from showing the right attitude at the right moment. Shall we start? Felix said with a wide eager smile after manifesting all the unlocked sin symbols in front of him. Now, he had all the tools, knowledge, and time to prepare for his next move, which would be nowhere as simple as the last time. He understood that the Unigens would be ready for him like they would be dealing with Lilith herself, and none of them would leave him room to take advantage of. Thus, his preparation had to be top-notch, and Felix planned on spending the next century on it. Whether he was ready to make a move during the ceremony or not depended on his readiness and confidence in his strength. Let's start with you two. Felix picked the indomitable wool symbol and the hunger symbol, desiring to recreate the Veil of Pride technique. In the meantime, at the eastern north side of the Eternal Kingdom, where the relentless tumult of Zeus's thunderstorm territory met the serene, crystalline expanse of Athena's domain, a crystallized table with two chairs was situated right on the border between those two mesmerizing territories. Zeus's realm was a living tempest, a boundless expanse where lightning danced across dark, roiling clouds and thunder echoed like the drums of war. It was a place of power, raw and untamed, where the air crackled with electricity and the rain fell like the tears of gods. Meanwhile, Athena's territory was a stark contrast in every conceivable way. Here, the landscape was dominated by structures of pure, shimmering crystal that refracted the light into a kaleidoscope of colors. These crystalline formations ranged from towering spires that pierced the sky to delicate filigrees that carpeted the ground, creating a domain of breathtaking beauty and calm, where knowledge and wisdom seemed to crystallize out of the very air. With two sudden flashes of light, Zeus and Athena appeared next to the table. This was their known meeting spot, where they held their important discussions related to their territories and other matters regarding the realm. While they were neighboring rivals, their enmity was halted by their territorial conflict, unlike Poseidon and Hephaestus, who seemed to be mortal enemies. It probably had to do with the laws they commanded being opposite forces, who knows? Zeus sat with a goblet of wine that appeared to contain a tempest within its depths, while Athena sipped on a cup of tea that mirrored the serene clarity of her mind. As they sat, their conversation shifted toward matters of pressing concern. His disappearance has left a void, Zeus remarked, his voice rumbling like distant thunder, speaking of Felix. I doubt we will be able to find him ever again unless the rulers decide to help out. Athena nodded, her eyes reflecting the multifaceted complexity of the situation. We both know that ain't happening. The Paragon's existence has proved to be of value to them after he took down Hephaestus and inherited his laws. What a mess! Zeus rubbed his eyebrows. The rulers were already planning to keep their hands out of this to save their precious celestial energy. Now? They will be more passive. Zeus and the rest of the Unigens all knew deep down the true nature of the three rulers. In their mind, they were certain that Hephaestus' death pleased them more, even though Felix was the one emerging victorious. After all, he got rid of a Unigen permanently without needing them to do anything. If Felix carried on in his spree and got rid of the rest of the lesser Unigens, it would finally allow the three rulers to completely monopoly the celestial energy with the upper Unigens. It was like the celestial energy was a massive pie separated into multiple slices and Felix was getting rid of the diners. Athena and Zeus' reasoning was proved to be correct as the three rulers discussed this the instant Felix slayed Hephaestus. It went like this. The boy's actions served as an unexpected advantage to us. His quest against the Unigens aligns well with our interests. The first ruler commented with an emotionless tone. The second, whose presence shimmered with the light of countless stars, nodded in agreement. Indeed, we will be finally able to stop the celestial energy from spreading past the dimensional pocket, and this will bring the cycles required to start our mission from 1,000,000 to a couple thousand at most. It wasn't like the three rulers couldn't take on the Unigens and reclaim all the celestial energy for themselves, but they comprehended that the resources needed to fulfill this would be astronomical. By the time they recollect the same amount of celestial energy, the universe would have already found another method to give birth to the same Unigens even if they took hold of their cores. The universe always found a way to bring back its balance, and the three rulers understood this more than anyone else. The prophecy hasn't spoken of this, but it makes sense when we see the final transformation of that boy. The third ruler uttered, whether a SNES core gets captured by the Unigens or the boy kills them all, it's a win-win either way. Their discussion, while strategic, disclosed an inferential thread of opportunism. They saw in Felix not just a rogue element or a potential threat, but a tool, albeit an uncontrollable one, that could inadvertently sculpt the celestial landscape to their advantage. By allowing him to confront the Unigens, they could eliminate rivals and consolidate their dominion over celestial energy, all while keeping their own hands clean. As for worrying about Felix getting stronger in this manner and maybe even reaching their level, none of them entertained such a joke. In their eyes, it didn't matter what Felix did or what kind of level he reached, the end was already decided. Back to the present. Luckily, the celestial ceremony is a special event, and even if they wanted to remain passive, they have to watch over our territories. Zeus smiled coldly as he gazed at the sky. Oh, how I wish they break their word and let the Paragon harvest celestial energy from our territories. Indeed, with the ceremony drawing near, our attention will be elsewhere. It presents an favorable moment for him, should he decide to act. Athena shook her head, but I doubt he will be stupid enough to go for it. Why? He is too smart, too cunning, and too prudent to risk making a move so soon when he had all the time in the world. Athena assured with a certain tone, now that he has made the first move and showed us what he is capable of, he will comprehend that his next action needs to be absolutely perfect to achieve the same results. There is no way he will be able to reach such a state in less than a century. Even if he could and pulled it off, he would still not make a move. Indeed, I see where you are coming from. Zeus agreed at the end. If I was in his position, I would spend at least 1,000,000 years in preparation before showing my face again. Especially, when I know that the three rulers will remain passive. You get it. Athena acknowledged in approval as she took a small sip of her tea. In her eyes, as long as the three rulers didn't decide to use underhanded methods like torturing Asna to get Felix into handing the core peacefully, he had nothing rushing him. Unbeknownst to her, Felix was also a risk-taker, and no one could really predict what was going in his mind. 1672 The sensation of mortality. At the same time, inside Poseidon's grand throne chamber, where the walls were adorned with corals of every hue and the floors mirrored the undulating surface of the ocean, Apollo was found lounging lazily on a cloud of darkness. Poseidon's gaze was fixed on Apollo, who seemed at ease amidst the aquatic splendor. While Poseidon wasn't too much of an Apollo fan, he had to invite him for his own sake. Apollo, Poseidon's voice boomed like the sound of crashing waves. I want to let you know that I have no intention of expanding my territory into yours. I'm happy with what I have, and I know you and Hephaestus had a peace agreement between you two. I want that. Brother Poseidon, I appreciate the offer, but I am afraid I have to decline. Apollo replied with a stern gaze, I have been at peace for far too long, and my fiery heart can't take it anymore. I have to battle you, no, I must fight you. Can you not mess around for once in your life? Poseidon's eyelids twitched, not taking him seriously one bit. Wasn't I pretty convincing? Apollo dropped the act with a faint chuckle. This is serious, Apollo. Poseidon remarked with a solemn tone, after conquering Hephaestus' territory, I am certain the other bastards will greed over my harvested amount of celestial energy from both territories. They will gun for me during the ceremony and I am not in the mood to enter another conflict with my neighbor. So, are we cool? Yes or no? Come on, posse. You want me to bush your face? Postian's expression turned cold the instant he heard the nickname. Didn't I tell you to never call me that? Cough, so intense, my bad, just chill. Apollo quickly apologized with a disappointed look. You know, life is more than just constant chase over celestial energy and strength. There is music, art, sex, and so much more. Why don't you visit my place and I will show you some good time? Yes or no? Apollo. Poseidon repeated with a suppressed tone, feeling like he was dealing with a man-child instead of an Unigen. Tisk, fine, we are cool. Apollo clicked his tongue in criticism. You guys are always so boring. That's all I wanted to hear. Poseidon exhaled his irritation away after receiving his approval at last. While Apollo was eccentric and a bit off rails, Poseidon had no interest in making an enemy out of him. In fact, not a single Unigen desired to be Apollo's enemy. Not even the ambitious Hephaestus dared to target Apollo's territory even when it always seemed so free for anyone to grab. It was for a good reason, as Apollo wasn't the same when he got triggered. Are you planning on sitting out of the ceremony again? Poseidon asked with a curious tone, or, do you already have someone in mind to challenge? Apollo, strumming a few thoughtful chords on his lyre, responded with a bored look. Met, I am satisfied with watching you tear each other up and composing some music out of it. Thought as much. Poseidon wasn't surprised. Apollo seldom participated in those battles unless someone challenged him for a significant portion of his celestial energy. The Unigens never bothered to challenge him since he was somewhat on good terms with all of them, even if they disliked his personality. Usually, the neighboring Unigens challenge each other to obtain a portion of the collected celestial energy or even some parts of their territories if they decide to bet on them. In this case, Poseidon vs Hephaestus, Athena vs Zeus, and lastly, Artemis vs Demeter vs Aeolus, since Apollo never took part in the battles. With Hephaestus gone and me in possession of his territory, I doubt this event will be anything like the previous ones. Poseidon narrowed his eyes coldly, having a strong feeling that anyone who got lucky and received the first challenging choice would aim for his neck. Don't worry, I got your back. Apollo showed him a thumbs up as he said, I will compose a masterpiece to cheer you on. Poseidon went silent for a moment and asked, why are you still here? For mental support. Apollo replied with a stern voice, I can't leave posse. Get the F***ck out. With a roar that echoed the thunderous crash of waves against cliffs, he hurled the trident in Apollo's direction, a clear message that the line had been crossed. The trident, a blur of motion and a force of nature unto itself, cleaved through the water and air of the throne chamber, aimed directly at where Apollo lounged. The chamber, accustomed to the serene beauty of underwater life, was suddenly filled with a thunderous explosion that sent shockwaves across the entire underwater city. Boom! But as the dust settled and the waters calmed, an eerie silence took hold. Where Apollo had once lain, there was now only empty space. The god of light, ever elusive and quick, had vanished before the trident could reach him, leaving Poseidon's display of anger to strike naught but shadows. Poseidon could only gaze at the spot Apollo had vacated, a mixture of frustration and vexation coloring his features. Annoying prick! Poseidon murmured as he retracted his trident, calling me posse here and there. What if it caught on? Good thing that asshole is DEA. Before he could finish his sentence, it suddenly dawned on him that Hephaestus, his mortal rival, was dead for real. He couldn't get revived even if he wanted, since Felix had erased his soul and replaced his position. While he hated Hephaestus to the bone, he still respected him as an enemy. His ending truly didn't leave a good taste in his mouth, even when he was the one taking the most advantage of it. He was here for billions of years, now, he is gone, forever and ever. Poseidon gazed into the distance as he tightened his grasp on the trident, feeling like his heart was about to burst. If I don't want to be next, I possess to be at my best at all times. The notion of having the possibility of true death weirdly made him feel more alive than ever. While the feeling remained foreign and played on his fear chords, he found out that he quite enjoyed it. The sensation of mortality, no wonder mortals live every second of their lives like it is their last. Poseidon released a faint chuckle as he calmed down his emotions. It's not so bad. The years dissolved into the ether, such as mist under the morning sun, leaving barely a trace as they passed. Before long, 9 decades had gone by. In the heart of the cosmos, within the confines of his throne chamber, Felix sat in contemplation with eyes closed. As he began to open them, the perspective began to zoom out, showing more than 20 colorful symbols floating above his head. Each one pulsated with intense power, a vivid testament to Felix's hard work and the depth of his exploration into the confluence of sins and symbols. These were not mere symbols, they were sigils, each representing a sin symbolic technique that Felix had painstakingly crafted. Some had been born out of 2 symbols merged from the same sin, and some even had 4 symbols merged from 4 different sins. Yet, the most unique ones had to be the mixed techniques with void, fire, and other sins. Those 20 or so techniques became his new most powerful assets in his arsenal, and Felix remained dying to test them on anyone worth his time. Alas! This is not enough. Felix frowned. I am left with only 10 years and I possess yet to arrive up with a decent plan. 1673 Embodiment of Laws. Why the rush? Candace tilted her head in confusion. You can skip over the ceremony and wait for another, giving you more time to prepare. You don't get it. Felix replied with a serious tone. Everyone will assume the same since it is the best choice to make. That's exactly why I need to take advantage of this opportunity to get something out of the ceremony. Felix was certain that even the shrewd Athena would believe that he would stay on the low for the next couple thousand years or even more. It wasn't even a choice, but a certainty. That's because Felix's assault was still fresh in their minds, and this would make them assume he wouldn't dare make a move in fear of failing. All of those points made Felix understand that while making a move in the upcoming ceremony was extremely bold and borderline idiotic, it had the highest chance of succeeding since he would most definitely catch at least one Unigen unguarded. Alas, while it sounded good on paper, he failed to come up with a flawless plan that would ensure at least his escape if he failed in his attempt. I don't know, I think the Unigens will still be wary of you showing up. Candace replied. That's only natural. Felix nodded. He wasn't naive to believe that the Unigens would completely remove his existence from their minds, just because there was a 0.00001% of him making a move on them so soon. But, they will be more worried about me invading their territories while they are in the ceremony. Even if the 3 rulers have their territories protected. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly. What I want is to make a move during their battles, taking advantage of the fact they are forced to fight in a separate dimension. Crazy, have you lost your mind? Candace covered her mouth in shock. Even if you figured out the perfect strategy, you will still be forced to deal with 2 Unigens at once. She is right, you know. Thor said with a solemn tone, I am certain those Unigens will be more than happy to take you 2v1, especially, if you dangled Isna's core before their eyes. While Unigens would be warier to take Felix one-on-one, they weren't scared of him in the slightest. Even Isna's core being able to devour theirs didn't scare them to the point they would avoid Felix. They were intelligent enough to figure out ways to counter it, and the tenants knew this. What if you made a move against them, just to realize that their cores were left in their territories? Fenrir assumed expressionlessly, if I was in their place, I would take advantage of the 3 rulers' protection during the events period and leave my core in my territory. It would be the most protected core in the universe. This was just one of the many ways to avoid getting devoured. I know all of this, why do you think I am struggling to come up with a plan? Felix sighed as he rubbed his eyelids. If it was a simple plan of creating a diversion and ambushing them during their battle, he wouldn't be overthinking this. The cores were his goal, and if they were left in their domains, then, he was F***ed, even with Felix's massive guts, he still wouldn't dare invade their domains under the three rulers' protection. It was always better to never poke the bear. Then? What? Candace smiled wryly. I genuinely believe it's best to sit this one out and continue improving your strength. If the ceremony arrived and I still have nothing to work with, then I can only do that. Felix wasn't planning to let his stubbornness be the death of him. There were times when he should risk it all and times when he should keep his head lowered. Still, he had an entire decade and Felix wasn't planning on giving up that easily. Asna, what will you do in my place? Felix murmured in his mind as he placed a hand on his human heart, where Asna's core resided. Asna seemed to have responded to him as her core twitched for a millisecond, causing Felix to show a faint saddened smile. I miss you, if only you were here with me, everything would be simple again, everything. When Felix began thinking of Asna more deeply, he began to realize that his goal had changed down the line from finding a way to establish a connection with Asna to targeting the Unigen's cores. The only time he could reach out to Asna was during the ceremony when the dimensional pocket remained open throughout. In other words, the seal applied would be deactivated. When did I become this greedy to aim for both the cores and Asna? Felix knitted his eyebrows deeply. There were always other chances to seek out the Unigen's cores after the ceremony since the three rulers wouldn't be protecting them anymore. But for Asna? He had only the ceremony to work with and yet, he was planning to either jeopardize the sole chance cause of his greed. While he would have spent his time focusing solely on Asna's strategy, he was losing his brain juice over an impossibility due to his greed and he didn't realize it until now. Have I been into my desires too much in the past 9 decades, they started to affect my judgment? Is that even possible? Felix didn't know what came to him as he felt like it wasn't him speaking, but another version with only wanting it all in its mind. It was a weird fleeting dreadful feeling. It seems like it's starting at last. Lilith chuckled. What do you mean? Felix felt his heart skip a beat, not liking the sound of her statement. You will soon come to understand that Unigens aren't the controllers of laws, but the embodiment of them. Lilith smiled knowingly and continued sunbathing with a lollipop on her violet lips. Aren't controllers of laws, but the embodiment. Felix murmured with a deep frown, sensing that there was something dangerous hidden in this sentence. Do you mean our thoughts and personalities are shaped based on our laws? Felix reasoned after he connected some of the dots. He recalled how Nemo's alter ego was based on Rathsin, which defined his personality as being easily irritable and always angry. Even Lilith's personality appeared to change constantly from seductive, playful, to manipulative merciless monster in the snap of a finger. Now thinking about it more deeply, Lord Hades' temperament resembles a strict emotionless corpse. Elder Kraken shared. The same is true for Hephaestus, he was ambitious, a massive risk taker, ferocious, and always heated, resembling heat-based laws 1-to-1. Thor added. If only they knew other Unigens on a personal level, they would come to understand that Apollo was bipolar, Artemis was a softy akin to a field of flowers, Aeolus was as carefree and unbothered as the wind, Demeter was as stern and tough as the ground, Zeus as dominating and regal as lightning, and the list goes on. Not a single Unigen's temperament was the opposite of his laws and it appeared like they had no control over it, unlike the primogenitors whose personalities were all over the place. The best example was Lady Phoenix, the laziest being in the universe with the control over fire element. Good luck. Lilith merely said this with a faint chuckle, having no interest in ruining her fun by telling Felix the truth. Why am I getting scared? Candace offered Felix a concerned look, fearing the day his temperament would change to resemble more of Lilith's. While she was concerned about this, Felix was more anxious about a much more dangerous issue. What will happen to me if I ascended 7 times and inherited dozens of laws? Will I still be the same me or a complete abnormality? He muttered as he gazed below at his reflection in the consciousness ocean. 1674 Challenging the Three Rulers' Authority. At the moment, Felix's only option was to be mindful of his decisions and thoughts, he was unaware of when the changes would materialize and could only hope for the best. Even if it's just Isna, it doesn't mean the mission will be easier. Lady Sphinx returned to the main subject, not wanting Felix to grow paranoid about his developing personality. I know, but it will make it somewhat doable. Felix replied calmly as he gazed at the sea of techniques behind him. I already have the initial plan in mind, plus necessary techniques and void creatures prepared for wishes. I need a great distraction to keep everyone's attention occupied, even the three rulers must fall for it. Distraction that works on even the three rulers. Thor and the rest showed deep wrinkles on their forehead at such a bold aim. Is it possible to use a wish? Candace suggested. Hiding from their eyes through wishes is one thing, but to create a distraction aimed at them? Even if I sacrificed all the void creatures and my citizens, I doubt the universe will give me what I want. Felix shook his head. Felix didn't want to risk more than 9 decades of cultivating void creatures for this moment, just to waste it on an uncertain wish. I see. Candace lowered her head and went back to brainstorming with the rest. Alas, even with more than 10 brains being involved, no one found anything that could work. Having the three rulers occupied was simply unfathomable in their minds, and no matter what idea came to them, their omnipotence destroyed it in the blink of an eye. What do I have that can affect them? Felix murmured to himself as he dove into his memories. Since he didn't have much, he was left with only the white and the black celestial flames. He eliminated the white flames since they could also utilize them. With a smooth flick, a small black flame was ignited on top of his index finger. Felix gazed at the flickering flame with a concentrated look. Celestial black flames, what can I do with you to help me achieve my goal? As he looked at it, his mind worked 1,000 times faster than the tenants. Even Lady Sphinx couldn't match his current analytical powers, making him technically smarter than her. Suddenly, a ludicrous thought came to him regarding one of the black flame's most potent effects. This is it. His pupils widened, reflecting the billions of images being translated into one unified plan. It was like his plan was missing one final link and he had finally found it. But, this *T might actually get me killed. Felix's heart skipped a beat at the horrifying consequences if he ever committed to his plan. Did you find something? Lady Sphinx asked after spotting the changes in his attitude. I think so, but it's too risky even for me. Felix smiled wryly. Even for you? The tenants raised their eyebrows in surprise. What Felix deemed doable, others saw as too risky. If even he had doubts about this one, then one should fear for his life. See for yourself. Felix went on and narrated the entire strategy from A to Z instead of just telling them what he planned on doing to distract the three rulers. When he was done, only silence prevailed in the consciousness space. Even Lilith was stunned, having her lollipop frozen out of her mouth and gazing at Felix like she was staring at a suicidal maniac. So. Felix scratched the back of his head with a forced smile. It's too much, right? Too much? Too much! Candace cried out loud, my lord! Are you actively trying to get yourself killed? How can you even consider this plan as viable? Felix, I am usually on your side whenever you want to carry with such risky moves. But this... Thor shook his head, I am sorry, but it's not worth it. Hold on a second, Thor. Lord Marduk interjected with a solemn tone. I agree it's not worth it if the end goal is to establish a connection with Isna, but this plan has genuinely a small chance of actually saving her. It's true. Lord Loki agreed, his eyes had a hint of seriousness in them. If everything went perfect, he might save Isna, and we all know that she is the key to the elimination of the three rulers. That's too much of a stretch. Lord Shiva closed his book and joined the conversation. The three rulers aren't some wax figures, their omnipotence is in a different league, and no matter how hard we try, we won't be able to comprehend it fully. Most of the tenants nodded in agreement. I think we need another opinion, Felix said after seeing that the majority were opposing the plan. We need you to drop it. Thor sighed, Felix, you are rushing too much. There will be many more ceremonies in the future and you can make your move during them with a much better preparation. Preparation? Elder Kraken responded with a forced smile, as much as I agree that the plan shouldn't be taken into consideration, I also know that even if Felix had millions of years to prepare, the risk involved won't change just because he managed to create some new techniques. In fact, he might never obtain a better chance, or worse, the rulers will turn impatient and make a move personally. To put it differently, Felix had to choose between waiting until he was ready for the future or utilizing the opportunity of catching his opponents off guard and attacking them during the ceremony, which no one would anticipate him doing. I don't think I will be better prepared, I have already created all the required techniques to pull it off and had a dozen more for assistance. Adding more won't give me many viable options. As for the wishes? I already have enough void creatures for them and adding more won't help me with bigger wishes, those are considered as abusing my powers and will force me to sleep no matter what I sacrificed. Felix remarked with a stern tone, on the other hand, I am afraid I will lose my momentum and confidence the more I wait. The fact that Felix wasn't being pressured to make a move by the three rulers might be seen as a positive, but at the same time, it was a deadly gift. After all, the ball was in Felix's court and the more he questioned himself, the worse it would get down the path since he would keep postponing making his move. He is right. Lilith winked at Felix in support, when it came to dealing with the three rulers, actions always beat perfection. No matter what you do or think, they will always have the upper hand on you. Aren't you then sending him to his damnation? Thor stated coldly. Let me finish. Lilith continued, but, I really think you might have a 1% chance of succeeding this time, with all of your plan's faults and risks, I genuinely think it has a decent shot of working if you execute it right. The tenants considered her opinion of great importance since they understood that her fate was linked with Felix's. If he died or got captured, it was game over for her too, if she wanted her freedom, then Felix had to reach the other side first. Thus, she could not be saying that to bait Felix into suicide. I ponder we have said enough, Felix. The ultimate word is up to you. Thor and the rest didn't try to talk Felix out of it anymore. 1% chance, that's lower than I anticipated. Felix murmured, knowing that if he failed, there would be no second chances, it would be game over once and for all. Still, he sensed like his heart was calling for him to commit to it like it was his destiny to take part in it. In the end, Felix closed his eyes and when he opened them again, there was no more hesitation in them. Give me all the information about the three rulers that I can take advantage of or at least be wary of. Felix requested with a cold tone as he eyed Lilith. So demanding, I love it. Lilith licked her lips in enjoyment as she replied, you have it. Felix wasn't stunned by this as he comprehended that Lilith could never let him deal with the three rulers unprepared, especially when her freedom depended on him. His next piece of action was no longer targeting Kors or talking with Isna, but her freedom. In other words, he was going to challenge the three rulers' authority directly and this was something not many beings managed to live past it to tell the tale. 1675 The Celestial Ceremony. A decade later. As the celestial ceremony commenced, the capital city of the Eternal Kingdom was alight with vibrancy and fervor unseen in what felt like forever. The air was thick with anticipation, the streets a tapestry of colors and sounds as citizens from every corner of the kingdom converged in celebration. Boom! 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 Fireworks exploded in the sky, painting the heavens with cascades of luminescent splendor, their reflections dancing in the eyes of the gathered throngs. The streets, lined with banners and lights, were alive with activity. Musicians played melodies that resonated with the very fabric of the universe, while dancers moved with grace, their forms blurring the lines between physical and ethereal. Artisans and vendors filled the air with the scents of exotic foods and the allure of arcane artifacts, each stall and performance a testament to the diversity and richness of the kingdom's many realms. At the heart of the city, the celestial palace towered over the festivities, a monument to the power and glory of the cosmos. Here, atop its highest spires, the Unigens sat upon thrones of starlight and shadow, their majestic forms a beacon to all who gathered below. There were only the lesser celestial realm Unigens, the upper celestial Unigens and the three rulers had yet to make an appearance. "How are you feeling about this?" Artemis asked her peers with a gentle tone. "Don't overthink it, Artie," Aeolus said as he enjoyed the festivities below in the streets. "This is just like any other ceremony. We trade out celestial energy for divinities, have fun fighting each other for some bets, and get separated again until the next ceremony arrives." "He is correct," Demeter remarked calmly. "The Paragon won't be making an appearance today unless he seeks his death." "I don't know," Artemis murmured. "I have been watching his journey closely in the mortal world and he always takes unnecessary risks. The weird part? He always makes them work somehow so." As one of Felix's avid fans with Apollo in the Unigen circles, she was more in tune with his personality than the others could realize. This made her have a tingling feeling that he was going to do something in the ceremony even when the odds were stacked against him. The others didn't think the same at all. "You are reading too much into this." Athena shook her head. "He is no longer a child. This is the real stuff and he knows that if he dares make his move, he better be prepared to not walk out of here alive. It's too much of a risk for anyone and only pure idiots would go for it. Just enjoy the ceremony, Artemis," Zeus advised with a solemn tone. "Don't let his existence play games in your mind. We are Unigens, we are above such emotions." "All right." Armidas nodded in understanding and switched her focus to the worshipping rituals down there. They were conducted with solemn reverence, a collective homage to the three rulers and the Unigens who sustained their existence. Performers enacting the stories of the kingdom's foundation, and the battles of Unigens captivated the audience, their narratives a blend of myth and truth that enthralled and enlightened. As celebrations reached their zenith, the atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation for the arrival of the upper celestial Unigens. First to make her entrance was Eris, the goddess of order and disorder. She glided into the venue with a grace that belied the chaos she commanded. Taking her seat, a hush fell over the crowd, a mixture of awe and apprehension palpable in the air. The Unigens greeted her with a casual tone since Eris was known for being not so formal. "Will the other two make it?" Zeus inquired. "Uranus has told me he will participate out of boredom, but I don't know about Ares." Eris replied calmly, "You know him, he must be sleeping somewhere outside of the kingdom. It's truly been a while since we saw him." Artemis chuckled in amusement. "I have never seen a Unigen commanding two of the most powerful laws in the universe, yet spend most of his time in a slumber willingly. The three rulers should count their blessings. Our strongest is a lazy waste," Poseidon sneered. "Bold words, I can't wait to see you repeat yourself in their face when they arrive." Suddenly, a rough cosmic voice resounded into the depth of the Unigen souls out of nowhere. Recognizing the owner of the voice, everyone's attention was drawn to the skies as Uranus, the Unigen of the cosmos, made his grand entrance. He descended from the heavens themselves, a swirling vortex of stars and nebulae trailing in his wake. Uranus's presence was commanding, his form enveloped in a cloak of deep space that twinkled with constellations. His eyes were like twin suns, burning with the power to create and destroy, representing laws such as vibration, radiation, gravity, dark energy, and magnetokinesis. He embodied whatever was left of the fundamental forces that bind the universe, which didn't already have a Unigen representing them. This made him one of the most powerful beings in the cosmos and a rightful owner of the title, the Sovereign of the Cosmos. As he took his place among the Unigens, a sense of grandeur and boundless potential filled the space. "Uranus, you haven't changed, your head is still stuck deep within the three rulers' asses." Poseidon mocked instead of getting threatened. "Your name fits you like no one else." "How funny." Uranus' expression remained indifferent, unbothered by Poseidon's mockery. He placed one leg above the other and gazed at everyone near him with a sense of displeasure. "How could you allow a recently ascended mortal to have such control over you, even to the point of killing Hephaestus and getting away with it. He chided with an icy stare, "Yet, you dare greed over an upper celestial position, how ridiculous!" Zeus and the others had their expressions turned for the worse, but alas, they had no retort against his claims. While they had nothing to do with Hephaestus' death, the fact that it happened in their presence and nothing was done about it until now was indeed a bit embarrassing for them. "That's enough, Uranus." Eris intervened before the situation could turn for the worse. "We are here to celebrate another cycle and have some decent entertainment, don't ruin it for me." "Just for you, Eris." Uranus repeated with a suppressed tone, "I will let it go just for you." Poseidon and the rest could only give him cold stares in silence, knowing that Uranus was the only Unigen who could be genuinely said to have sold out to the three rulers. While the rest of the Unigens were in a beneficial partnership with the three rulers and could turn against them at the first notice of inconvenience, Uranus was an avid supporter of the three rulers' end goal. He sought his freedom just as hard as the three rulers and would do anything to achieve it. So, to hear that his peers had failed such a simple mission of recovering Asna's core and even ended up losing one of their own didn't sit well with him. If it wasn't for the three rulers' desire to also have the Unigens slain by Felix and have their cores absorbed, they would have sent him next immediately. Speaking about the three rulers, the moment had arrived that everyone had been waiting for as the fabric of reality itself seemed to fold high above the celestial palace, causing everyone to look upward with bated breaths. In an instant, a dimensional pocket unfolded like the petals of a cosmic flower, revealing the pathway to the universe's very heart. From this ethereal gateway, a tide of pure celestial energy surged forth, a luminous wave that cascaded over the assembled masses. It was as if the essence of life and the cosmos had been distilled into a single, overwhelming rush, invigorating every being it touched. Faces lifted in awe, and hearts swelled with an indescribable sense of renewal and vitality. Then, amidst the collective breath of thousands, 3 radiant points of light emerged from the dimensional portal, falling gracefully toward the heavenly palace. The crowd erupted into a cacophony of cheers and shouts, a resounding chorus that filled the air with fervor. "All hail the three rulers! All hail the three rulers! All hail the three rulers!" The reverence and adoration were palpable, a shared sentiment that unified every voice in exaltation. While the Unigens had their citizens, the majority were still considered non-affiliated and under the direct rulership of the three rulers. Most of them resided in the capital city and the cities around it, which meant this moment was extremely significant for them. As the three luminous beings took their places at the zenith of the heavenly palace, their brilliance intensified, casting the entire city in a divine glow. These were not merely points of light but the embodiments of cosmic sovereignty, beings of unparalleled power and wisdom, whose very presence was a blessing upon the realms they oversaw. Perched at the highest vantage point, they surveyed their domain, guardians of order and architects of fate, their gaze encompassing the entirety of the celebrations below. "They are as dignified and fearsome as the first time I saw them," Athena remarked with a solemn tone. The rest of the Unigens felt the same, even Poseidon with his loud mouth kept his words to himself, not daring to repeat what he said before. He saw the three rulers from one ceremony to another and every time, he was reminded of the difference in power and social status between them. If Unigens were considered as gods for mortals, then, the three rulers, were the gods of the gods in terms of presentation and aura. Just as the Unigens were about to go up and greet the three rulers personally, a radiant beam of light was released from the gateway. Within this beam, a figure emerged, enveloped in a cloak of light so pure it seemed to draw the very essence of the cosmos around her. Her appearance was both serene and powerful, a paradox made manifest, as she stepped into the realm of the physical, crossing the threshold from her dimensional exile. "This. Am I seeing right? It can't be." The Unigens were left stunned as they traded glances with each other, seemingly seeking clarification from the other. None of them expected Asna to be released from her imprisonment to join the ceremony as they knew that this would allow her to link up with her core. Unbeknownst to them, Even Felix and the tenants spectating the event through his far-reaching senses were left frozen the instant Asna entered their view. That's because this would change most of their prepared plan. Yet, Felix didn't seem to care about that at the moment. Asna. Felix muttered with a voice filled with longing, reaching his outstretched hand into the nothingness, seemingly trying to hold her cheek. Alas, nothing was on the other side.